Hello. Uh, Jason, how are you? Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at. To people coming into the Voice of Money, appreciate you joining us. Be getting rolling in just a few minutes. Always good to start this thing up a couple minutes early and make sure it works. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at. To those joining the Voice of Money, coming on into the Zoom, we'll get going in just a few minutes. If you're joining the Zoom, welcome to the Voice of Money. It is the top of the hour. We'll start in a few minutes. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of a company called Score Publishing based in Nashville, Tennessee, host of This Week in Voice, the show you see on the screen behind me. We're excited to have you here. Got a really good program for the next couple of hours here. Just watching the Zoom. Looking for John Best when he arrives. So this event today is all about the intersection of voice technology, conversational AI, and modern banking and finance. You're going to hear from a number of different folks doing a variety of different things to augment that sector and make it better through this technology. And we're excited to host this conversation. And this is the third year of us doing this. It takes me a minute to think about it. Typically, this event takes place in the financial district in New York City, and couldn't be there today for obvious reasons. And we look forward to when we can do that again. But it wasn't to be this year, and it's turned into a pretty popular event. And what's great about this year, the silver lining, so to speak, is that we can make it complimentary. We can do this sort of as a community service, and really highlight a wider variety of speakers and companies than maybe we typically could, and make this more broadly available than we typically could. So that's the way we choose to look at this. For those joining the Zoom, welcome. You're in the right place. The Voice of Money will be starting shortly. So if you are registered for the Voice of Money, you'll receive the audio and video files of the proceedings afterward. So if you pop in, pop out, we know that a lot of people will do that. That's perfectly fine. You'll get everybody's talks after it's over to enjoy on demand at your convenience. I'm watching this. I'm looking for John. He has not joined us yet. I'm sure he'll be in a minute. Trying to think of anything else I need to say. So a couple of points of order. So the way that Zoom handles webinars is there's a chat function. You're welcome to use that. Good morning to y'all who have used that. But if you got a question for speakers as the day goes along, there's a Q&A box at the bottom. Well, the way I'm looking at it's at the bottom. It might be anywhere, might be somewhere else on your screen. We ask you to use that to post questions, and I'll keep an eye on that and moderate that for the speakers. So there's John Best. I'm going to promote him. John, how are you?
Hey, man. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I've learned not to assume where people are calling from. I know we got some folks from Japan registered. I'm not certain if they're in here yet. We got folks from all over the place, and we did something a little bit different with this. We had the Eventbrite page, which is sort of our old standby at how we handle registrations, but then LinkedIn just a week and a half ago opened up event registrations. You can handle events through there. So we created a page and got a lot of folks registering and through there. So, we got a couple of hundred folks, between 200 and 300 registered. And so we'll see, give them some more time to get on in here. But John, we appreciate you being with us this morning.
Oh, very excited. Thank you for having me.
So before we get going, take a moment, and you do a variety of different things. Tell us what Best Innovation Group is, and tell us who you are and all the stuff you got your hands in.
Sure. So Best Innovation Group is a group of us that have been working together for 30 years plus, honestly, since we were kids. And we kind of grew up together, and we started working in credit unions and doing technology. And we started off by creating some of the early digital technology, home banking, bill pay, not creating as in we were the first, but certainly we were early on into the internet and some of those areas. And as time went on, we grew in the financial industry, specifically in the credit union space. And we wound up at a very large credit union in California called Westcom. And from there, they started what's called a CUSO. A CUSO is a credit union service organization that provides services to other credit unions. And our specific service was digital services like bill pay, home banking, that sort of technology. And what I noticed was that one, home banking kind of had played out. I mean, it's still got a lot of opportunity, but it's sort of stabilized into a very specific set of services and features that we all know is table stakes for most financial institutions. What was missing was sort of a digital mindset, and so with that in mind, I took the leap in 2014 with my friends, and we started Best Innovation Group, otherwise known as BIG. And BIG has several arms to it, one of which is basically thought leadership. I wrote a book in 2017 or 18 now, and the book, it's out there. It's called Breaking Digital Gridlock. And that book was really not a how to do home banking or how to do digital, or pardon me, you should do digital like a lot of other books, convincing you that digital is the way. It was really a how to do digital and nuts and bolts of it, with a lot of cultural and what I call therapy in some ways, because there's a lot of therapy involved in getting to those spaces. The other side of it is being called Innovation Group. We started an innovation, what we call a club. We recognize that even the larger credit unions struggled with innovation because, unless you have a specific acumen around it, it's difficult to keep going. And if it's not your day job, then, life is always going to get in the way. And so with that in mind, we organized a group because I'm kind of always playing with stuff. As you mentioned, I got my fingers in a lot of things. And we started a group that specifically, its purpose was to do innovation on behalf of a whole lot of other credit unions working together. So the idea is to chase down the things that we think are interesting, whether it be what I call ingredients, which are technologies that will eventually shape finances or financial services, or if they're just products that are already out there that we think are innovative. The goal is to bring those guys to the table if they've got something cool. And if we see an ingredient that we see could be used in, say, any number of financial processes, it could be ACH, it could be bill pay, it could be any number of things. And one of those ingredients that I ran into along the way, very early on, was I think I immediately saw when they put out the Pringles can, the very first Alexa, and I have to be careful because I got like 10 of them around here, so they'll all wake up. But I immediately ordered one, and my first priority was to connect it to connected to financial services. I knew right away that would be value there. That effort evolved into a platform that we call FIVE, which stands for Financial Interactive Voice Experience. And the idea was that we quickly realized that voice was a very different animal compared to everything else, just a very different animal. Right away, we figured out, wow, this is the kind of thing where you don't have to go searching through a million levels of, like, for instance, let's say you wanted to stop your e-statements or, change your address in home banking. That might be 6 levels deep in a menu somewhere. Whereas this is something you could just say, hey, unnamed voice assistant that I don't want to wake up, tell Suncoast Schools Credit Union that I want to change my address, and it could be done. And so the power of that struck me very quickly. Also, I noticed right away, because when I buy something, I generally buy something for my mom. She is 70 plus. And if Alexa could be made to go to the bathroom for her, she would never get up again. It's her friend. In fact, I'm on her little, I could see the things she asked it. And it's amazing how often she uses it during the day, and how often she asks it things, all kinds of stuff, weird stuff. My mom will ask, like, who was one of the actors in some ancient movie with John Wayne? And surprisingly enough, it answers. So why that's important to her at that point in time, I don't know, but we all have those things. And so I think that, as Big went along, we grew into that space. So we've kind of got this 3-pronged approach of thought leadership, things like this, the consulting side, which includes the innovation, as well as doing digital integrations of other services and platforms, and then our product side, which is FIVE. So that's us.
I enjoyed your book. Yeah, it's a great book you wrote, and I appreciate.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You gave me a copy of that, and so we can sit here and have a chat, or if you got slides, you can fire them up. I can make you the host either way.
Yeah, I got slides. I'm ready to rock here. Let's do this.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make
you
the
the host. Some ideas I wanted to share with everyone. So
that's great. So I just did that.
Okay, hang on just a sec while I get it going. All right. Let me just make sure you're able to see it. And right now you're kind of in the way. So let me move you there. All right. Are you able to see this screen okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Awesome. All right. Well, I just introduced myself, so no need to do that. So let's kind of start off with, where we are. And, VoiceBot AI, if you haven't been there, that's the best site in the planet for stats on voice. So mobile app users that would like voice interaction options, clearly it's growing, right? There's very few people that are definitely not, and a lot of people in the I'm not sure, and a lot of people in the yes, it would be nice. One of the things that I've noticed a lot is my wife really kind of growing into no more typing to respond to text messages, really using the voice assistant a lot for that. I think there's a lot of promise in those kinds of interactions, sort of replacing the voice. And I'll get to that and what the future of that looks like. So we definitely have this growing constituency of people that want this in their applications, beyond just Siri or, the Google Assistant or Bixby in the phone. They want to go a step further. They want something that is tailored. And let me stop there and explain a theory that I sort of live by. And it's this. There are a lot of folks who are sort of proclaiming this idea of general AI, this idea that there'll be this all-knowing Skynet type AI or a Jarvis or however you want to do it. And the reality is that that's not going to happen anytime soon. What we will have are specialized AIs. And I want to make sure that we understand the difference between a true AI and a voice natural language processor. So a true AI is something that has domain in a certain area. It has been taught specifically about a subject. And in all of our science fiction and all of our movies and things like that, this AI is always all knowing and has access to the internet. But real AI, it works much more like Alexa, right? Where you have to form your phrases a certain way. And it doesn't know everything about everything. I mean, there's often times when um, the voice assistant that shall not be named for fear of it waking up will tell you that, yeah, I can't help you with that, but here's what I found on the internet. So when I see this graph, what I think of is that people are looking for specific mobile voice interactions that are area specific, like finance. Walgreens, for instance, could benefit from a voice app. I think pharmaceuticals is ripe for voice apps. They use them in their phone systems. It would be great to have them on the app, particularly in during the pandemic. There are other industries and other apps that Amazon could benefit from a voice app that's specific to retail. Specifically, if it could help me get a PS5, which, if anybody out there, you said we have people on from Japan. So if there's anyone from Sony, John wants a PS5, he'll send you lots of books and pay handsomely. So what's been pushing us lately? And this is a little spot where I'll throw it to you. What we're seeing in the financial industry is because of COVID, digital services have skyrocketed. Now, it doesn't take like a genius to figure that out, but has voice technology adoption rose? And I know I had you on my town hall, Bradley, to talk about this a little bit, but this is a recent survey, and we're continuing to see people use it more and more. Now, in the home, I don't believe this is because of touch right away. I don't think touchless technology is really the push here. I think that you're in your house, all of the digital services are up right now because that's our extended reality out into the world at the moment. That's what we have that's safe. But with that in mind, it really doesn't matter what's driving the adoption. It's the fact that it is growing and quickly. So that's one thing that has been a big push that we've seen in the financial industry as well. And honestly, most financial institutions are looking for ways to offset their call center. That's a big one, which I'll get to in a little bit, and their digital services, because they're being overwhelmed. So having voice is another option is really important. And the third part is that we're seeing continually that the old adage of, oh, mobile's for millennials, that just does not apply to this technology. It is across the board. And the reason is because anyone can talk. And so if you could speak, you're good. So let's take a quick look out there. And this is something you and I have talked about a lot, Bradley, is this idea that it's in everything. Voice is in cars pretty regularly. I like the motorcycle helmet. Have you seen that before? The motorcycle helmet?
I hadn't seen that motorcycle helmet. I've seen a number of other wearables that have it baked in, but yeah, no, your point's well taken.
Yeah, the toilet, of course, because who wants to touch the little flusher thing? So that's important. And then this lawnmower at the bottom, because if you're going to have these autonomous things, they need an interface. And we cannot have 10,000 apps connected by Bluetooth to 10,000 different things. So what does that mean? It means that voice will continue to grow. And one of the things that will drive it is its proliferation into devices. More and more, it'll become the interface. One, because it's a cheaper version of an interface. It's far cheaper to talk to to set up an interface from an electronic standpoint, from a technical standpoint, to talk to appliances or to talk to these things than to set up 1,000 buttons that people got to press in the right order to get something to happen. And so, you've got this, again, back to my thesis in the beginning, which is this idea that voice UX is very, very different from any UX, whether it be a website, whether it be a control panel on a shuttle. I don't know. Did you see, Bradley, did you see the space, the crew in the SpaceX launch, and their what looked like they were in the Wall-E? For a minute, they showed them all lined up in their little, in the beginning of the pod there. And it really did look like they were launching, in the Wall-E spaceship. It's so different than what you see from NASA, where a bunch of dudes in orange suits that we've been seeing since, 1989 pop out with giant round fishbowl helmets and get in. It's a very different experience,
Yeah, I did see that.
And you got to think, well, inside that helmet is another great opportunity for voice and heads-up displays, which we'll get to. So one thing's clear, everything that isn't already voice enabled will be soon. It doesn't matter what it is, it will be. One, because the technology is getting easier to implement. Two, because it makes a lot of sense. So where are we at currently, right? Where are we today? What can financial institutions expect to do with voice? Well, for me, this is, 2000, I'll call it 1999 on the internet. So in 1999, I was very privileged to be one of the very, part of a group that rolled out one of the very first internet home banking products. It was by a company called Carillion. Great friend of mine named Gary Coates was my account person for that. It was actually created out of a Canadian group, First Tech, out in Oregon. And basically, these commands and what's happening here, other than maybe the going on vacation and the lost card, were really the table stakes. If you could get in, see your balance, look at history and do a transfer, oh my goodness, you were in heaven. This was, Space Odyssey 2001 back then. Now we know it to have taking pictures of checks. We know it that you can go in and do loans of all sorts and types. You can go in and modify specific areas of your mortgage so that your next payment only pays the principal. All these different things that took so much time to get to, because what they're trying to do is build interfaces for things that are very difficult to build interfaces for. So this was really it. Now there are a couple things down here, like for example, the lost card or going on vacation, that are, I think, kind of specific to the voice piece, right? Being able to go in and I don't know, how many times have you gone somewhere, Bradley, and you get where you're going and your card doesn't work?
It's happened. Yeah, that's been a thing.
Yeah, and so one of the reasons is you don't know where to call or who to tell, so that when you get where you're going. Now that's that's the thing of the past, since we're all going never anywhere again. But this idea that, I'm going to move you over so I can see you, because I'm kind of like talking to the left here. But the idea that you could just say, Alexa, tell my credit union I'm going on vacation, and have her go, well, where are you going? Well, I'm going to somewhere safe from COVID, and you give it the dates and it automatically takes care of that. Now, that is the kind of thing we're headed towards. This idea of spending totals is another example. Those are things you like to know on the fly. There are all kinds of things. That's another difference with voice UX. There are all kinds of things that you wish you knew, but it's effort versus reward, right, Bradley? So like, I'd really like to know how much I spent here, but I'm not really kind of in the mood to go jump up on the computer and dig that out of an interface, right? But if it is that it's right in front of you and you could just ask a voice assistant so simply, you may do that, because then that effort versus the reward is very different. It's the reason that, if you go to the grocery store, there are people who are looking for, and I'll give an example of Hunt's ketchup, right? Now, we all know the number one ketchup in the world, which is Heinz, but Heinz occupies all the middle rows. Hunt's is on the bottom. Now, there are people who actually see the Hunt's ketchup and still go, it seems like a lot to bend all the way down there and get the Hunt's. I'm just going to get the Heinz because it's right in front of me. And so that's a very, that is the world we're living in. And so as that changes and time goes on, what do? Well, low hanging fruit in terms of service is also going to be a thing. So being able to ask your spending totals and that effort and that friction being so much less is going to create more use. So these are the things that are out there right now. Have you seen anything that I'm not seeing here, Bradley?
No, this is pretty comprehensive, but this is along the lines of what I've spent time thinking about. John, you talked about how COVID's accelerated everything, and um, I think in different sectors that'll manifest different ways. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. For 2017, 2018, even into 2019, that banks, credit unions, financial institutions getting involved with voice. They're taking babies, several taking baby steps. You saw some like Bank of America maybe jump in a little bit more, but with several, you saw them take baby steps. Give some of the stuff on this slide. Give the account balance. What are the branch hours? That's another good one. I've one of my working theories is that as we start to come out of COVID, whenever that is, um, we're going to see almost immediately those 2.0 sorts of things built upon the 1.0 that came before it. What do you think that might include? Any feature or two stand out to you that might be a 2.0?
Oh yeah, actually, yeah, you're kind of jumping ahead here. So let me get to that. I'm
Okay,
coming to that. I've
sorry.
actually got a whole. No, it's great. It's a great question. And I'll say one word, and this definitely leads into that. So here we see three of the biggest players, right? These are all enormous organizations. I mean, just billions of dollars behind all of them. And so you've got Erica, and whatever U.S. Bank is calling theirs, I can't remember right now for whatever reason. But it's interesting because what I'm seeing from all of these assistants, to your point of what the future is behavioral banking, right? So, and what that really translates to is proactive banking. So today, it's very easy to get, excuse me, it's very easy to set up alerts to get things on what did happen. So, for example, Bradley, you just had an NSF. That's kind of like saying, Bradley, you just got hit by a car. I think I'm aware of that. I felt it, but it's going to tell you. Obviously, where we want to get to is in the next step of everything is, Bradley, if you don't do something different in the next X amount of time, you're going to have an NSF, right? That's a very different approach. That's the more proactive approach of what we're seeing. And where voice fits into this is on to the next level, which is the prescriptive approach, right? Hey, Bradley, here's how you never have an NSF again. And what I'm seeing from the big players as they march down this road is that's really where they're headed with these voice assistants is how to build systems that have advice. The question is, much like Skynet and all of the other AI that we talked about, do we use it for good or for bad, right? So, for example, there once was a time I was in a panel, not unlike this panel, that I got invited to. It was me. It was the CEO of Fifth, or not the CTO of Fifth Third, the CTO of Bank of America was there. I mean, it was huge, and I was on this panel, and I was like, "Wow, they invited me." Okay, and one of the things they asked us what our major project was, and one of the major banks said, well, one of my major projects was to make sure that balances were actually real on all of the ATMs. And for context, and many of you who are on this call know these things, that the larger banks, when they do mergers, they don't necessarily, jam everything into one database. They just sort of peripherally connect them. And so in a way, you could have sort of batch mode between them where something's not real time on an ATM. And he told the story of what it took to do that. Then he said, yeah, and then we rolled it back. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of work. And I said, and I couldn't help myself. You never want me on a panel where I'm supposed to be quiet and not talk to other people. And I was like, well, why? Because I'm sitting right next to the person. He says, well, it turns out once people knew their balances, our fees went down. So once people knew what they actually had in the account, they weren't running into the overdraft fees.
Mm.
They literally rolled it back because that's what they do. So how do you keep these AIs? And we're already there. I mean, this is, I could do, we should probably do a show on this, Bradley. But the idea that this will lead to something similar to what's happened with YouTube, for example, when they changed their metric from how many likes a video got to how long it was watched, and then giving you more and more and more of the same. Like if you like cat videos, then you're getting more cat videos. This could easily turn into that, right? Like, hey, we're just going to keep driving you down this range of services that are meant to sort of insulate you from your behavior as it relates to overdraft. And so, and I'm not saying any of these banks are doing that. They all have, these services are all fantastic. I've used them all. It's more about what we do in the future, and particularly in the name of profit. So this behavioral concept is moving along. So right now, everybody is in this historical mode, right? Let me tell you what happened. And let me try to tell you in a timely manner, but it's already happened. So nothing you could do about it. It's kind of like, if you see that commercial where a dude pulls the, they're robbing the bank, and the guy goes, hey, they're robbing the bank. And she goes, why don't you do something? He goes, no, I just tell you that they're robbing the bank. That's what I do.
I have seen that.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar concept, right? So what are we looking at here? We're looking at, again, back to COVID in this, because this really does speak to what these new features are, in my opinion. So the new normal is, wow, home banking and mobile banking. There are people who just vehemently refuse to ever do a remote deposit. I'm never doing that. That just seems like a hoax. My check I'll never get that money. Who were forced kicking and screaming into it. And they did it. What's interesting, though, is that they did it and it worked, but we're still seeing, as branches reopened in the spring, or pardon me, in the fall, as branches reopened, they came back. They were like, yeah, I did that, but no. But now I think, unfortunately, we're headed for another shutdown. I don't see how we aren't. And we're going to watch this go up again, because there's not going to be another option. So, but we did watch home banking, people who were, imagine that you built a system, and that system was built around the idea that X% of your entire membership or your clientele would use it. And one day that X% expanded by 10X, and it was a huge problem. Call centers were absolutely overwhelmed. And one interesting concept that's happened with the call centers is that we've seen where call centers are a hive mind. And by that, I mean, they are all in, the call centers are all in sort of one spot. And so let's say, Bradley, you and I were in the call center, and somebody asked me a question, and I was like, hang on, close my little thing. Hey, Bradley, psst, how do we do this? But when you're not there, when you're here and you're in my lab down here, it's a very different model, right? And so you're by yourself, and you're not getting that. So now, as time has gone on, we're watching some of the call center statistics, particularly around customer satisfaction, dwindle, because they're not getting, they don't have the hive mind concept, to deal with. And because one of the things we did to deal with call centers being overwhelmed was we took a lot of people who are forward-facing customer service folks, and we put them into the call center all of a sudden, which you'd think was, kind of the same, but it's not really. There's a lot to that, very different people call the call center than use the branch, in some ways. So, and then we actually obviously have the branch. So the thing I'm thinking, rather, the first feature that I kind of see coming is this idea of minding the gap. You ever been to Britain, right? Every time you get on this, on the tube, there's this lady is mind the gap, because there's this gap between where the tube is, which is the actual train, and then the platform, and they don't want you to step in it, fall over, and die. Well, we have a gap, right? We have a gap between all of these products. There's this blank spot sort of here, right? So you've got these areas, and all of a sudden you've got home banking, you've got call center, they're over capacity, and the branch is out. So what do? Where does that lead? And what I think the bigger banks are thinking is this idea that, and I'll skip past this one. I think I just kind of explained this. is the idea that the voice assistant transcends all of that, right? There is now and could be finally a service that could be at the branch, could be whispering in the teller's ear, could be whispering in the call center person's ear, could be directly boiled into home banking a la Erica, a la Eno, could directly be boiled into mobile, right? And could be a standalone service. And what it can do is it can transcend all of those channels. And I don't think everybody's completely thinking that way, but it can. It can be the glue that fills in. It could be the filler for that gap. It is and the call center, which is a big one, right? And so that's when I look at this from a platform perspective, when I look at this from a holistic perspective, this is what I see. This is sort of spackling over a lot of areas, right? Why put more effort into a difficult transaction inside the home banking that's difficult to digitize because of the UX when it would be far simpler to build a voice model, right? But the key is you got to bring, the mountain to Bob or Bob to the mountain, right? And in this case, it's better to try to bring the mountain to Bob in all of these areas, which is, it's very simple because there isn't a huge UX to drive this into all these platforms. So this idea that both communication and transactional will be transcended by a voice system, I see that coming. So that's my nickel prediction. That and another nickel will get you a bowl of soup. But that's where my head is right now. So now let's talk about what you're talking about. What are the innovations? What are the next things? So the first thing I see is, it's obvious to me that voice is, because of the nature of the back end of it, this natural language processor, right? This idea that we have these joint intent classification engines. And what that means is I said something, the system is going to convert it to an intent. Whatever I said, I had an intent for it. And if my intent was to get a mortgage, then it could be converted to something to get me a mortgage. But those systems can obviously transcend natural language in terms of speech, which is into areas like this. So Bradley, I think you have kids, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, I've got an 8-year-old.
You've got an 8-year-old plus the little guy I met. I got his book around here. I love that kid.
Oh yeah,
Kid Trillionaire. So
he's not mine, but he's a good friend.
Yeah, he's a good dude. So you should have him on. He should be a keynote speaker. But do your kids play any online games, or is he there yet?
He's playing Minecraft.
Okay, so Minecraft's a good one because you know how they communicate if they're on Minecraft with other people is Discord. So Discord, for those of you that don't know Discord, you need to look at it. Discord has turned into this huge platform where, if kids are gaming and doing all these things, they're all on Discord. They get on one big channel. They sometimes have servers, and they all sit there and talk, almost like the old, remember when you could conference people in back in the day when we were, you got a phone in your room and, you're like, yeah, I could do a 4-way call. I could get my buddies on and we could all talk, plan our takeover of the world. That's really what that has become. Whoops. How do I get back there? Whoops. There it goes. So the idea that my mouse is doing it. The idea that there's opportunity in all of these other channels to extend that, because I see us evolving into bots, and these bots can be in any channel. So you may want to have a bot in these areas: Skype, Facebook Messenger, Discord, Telegram. All of these services are upcoming services, as evidenced by the rise of Twitch, which has been ridiculous. Discord is often used in the Twitch channels as well. So new channels, that's one area I see when you ask me about new features. This one is a big one. This is a nut that I've been asked to crack several times, and I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to do it yet, but it's definitely one that is out there, which is, how do we take this service that we've built and continue to expand on, this natural language processing service for 5, which is our product, but whoever you are, whether it's Erica, whatever, this voice service, and how do you integrate it into the call center in a meaningful way? And I'm not sure, but I know this. There are, we've got some ideas. We've already seen where it will pull off calls from the call center. So that's good. So it'll definitely could reduce your call center volume. That's 100%. but how do you build it in to be part of that channel? Is it a three-way conversation with Alexa and an agent, Bradley, or is it because no one wants the, hey, the whole big joke, I want to talk to a human, right? That you don't want that. But how is that going to shape out? Because it's a natural progression to where I think this voice assistant agent calls or something like that, something that reduces the time of the call, that increases the efficacy, that increases the value to the consumer or the member. That's the new nut to crack. And
Well, there's a
one of
lot
the
of
challenges. What's that?
yeah, there's a lot of companies working on that problem. And I think that it'll be interesting to watch as we emerge from whatever the next step is from COVID, whether it's just perpetual hills and peaks and valleys, or whether we come out of it or whatever. I think that as we learned with 9/11, there's going to be some people who just have their behavior permanently altered. And in the call center, there's a lot of companies working on that right now, how to manage greatly increased call volume with the same amount of people, or just slightly increased manpower. So yeah, that's well taken.
Well, and one of the challenges I see with this is the walled garden that Amazon has built. Because the way their natural language processing works is it's really kind of tied into them in a very big way. And we've got to figure out how they can continue to maintain their autonomy, because I know that's what they want, but expose this service so that we can use the same services. Because one of the challenges you have is, yeah, we could solve this, you could build this, but then it'll be a different solution than Alexa. And that just is not going to fly in the voice realm. You can't have one service, you can't have one talking piece of plastic be dumber than the other talking piece of plastic. We can't have an Android iOS feature dysfunction happening in this model, in my opinion.
No, yeah, no, I completely agree. And we got to wrap up here, John. So what are your parting thoughts? And I got a question for you at the very end before we get to nuance.
So yeah, let me parting thoughts is contextual, using Google to set appointments in a new world where you can't just wander in a branch with a whole lot of people in it. That's going to be a big one. Setting up Zoom appointments. That's the next big feature I see, Bradley, and for voice. It's super simple to do. I think it's a big one. The behavioral banking, getting into the notifications on these products and platforms. It's almost like you have a little blinking mailbox in everyone's home. That's a big one for banking. This is a huge one. The glasses, you mentioned it earlier. I know for a fact Apple's really heavily looking into these things. So is Google. When we get to the point where you have these glasses, you're not going to break out your phone to make all this work. It's definitely going to be a voice interface. And that leads us to real world interactions, right? Looking at something, getting context on that. And you look at this and go, well, what's that have to do with finance? Well, you're always buying. If you look at all of this stuff, all of this is related to buying. Our whole life is about buying and spending money and not spending money, period. So this is a product called World Gaze or a project called World Gaze that's out there that's interesting, that is kind of moving in that direction. And that's really it. So the contextual banking on, hey, how and when do I meet you? How do I meet these services? How do I set up a meaningful meeting? How do I set up a Zoom call? And then maybe your AI, your Alexa AI is able to join a Zoom meeting and take notes on that for you and follow-ups, things like that. These real world interactions, this is a big deal. This is like 2 or 3 years out, but everyone will be wearing glasses. So you'll be hip again. You'll be cool, Bradley. You're already in the glasses thing.
I wouldn't hold your breath.
You're already rocking it. And then these notifications. So that's it. And I'll throw over to your questions.
No, that's great. So I'm going to hit,
I'm going to stop my screen sharing and.
Yeah, there you go. And so we've got nuance coming up after this, but I got to ask you, since you brought up sort of proactive AI being sort of the next phase. So I just, I've been doing a lot of cleaning, sorting through things, here toward the end of the calendar year. And I found a check from 2012 for $50 from Vanderbilt University. I don't know, it has nothing in the memo line. I don't know where it's from. I'm not proud of it because that's pretty stupid. But I found it, and I then proceeded to spend the next hour Googling what to do with that. You know, if I deposit it and then it's returned, that just becomes way stupider. You know what I mean? But if I throw it away, I can't throw it away. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, I got you.
if I go to them to reprint it, then there's another hour wasted trying to figure out who it is. So having a proactive AI, I was actually thinking about that. I was like, I wish I could just tell this voice assistant not to be named, you know, my question and have it answer, or a bank assistant. So I
Yeah.
was thinking a lot about that just last week.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on. I think that, and that's a great example of a domain AI, right? A generalized AI is not going to know the nuances of Check 21 and the current Fed laws around when a check expires and whether or not it has to be kept on the books and whether or not that account even exists anymore after 8 years. But a domain specific AI built around finance, in particular financial health. But I'll go a step further. Here's one: a proactive payment mechanism. Why, if we lived in a world where Vanderbilt could have said, "Hey, we sent you a check. We noticed you never deposited." Or I did some research out there, and I looked in the Fed books, for real-time payments, and I noticed that you have, you get these sometimes. Oh, hey, there's all this money left over somewhere for people who had payments that didn't know they were coming. It actually happened to me. Apparently, my grandparents owned a portion of an oil well that they literally went to Vegas on a vacation, got pulled into some, like almost like a timeshare, and bought this thing. It wasn't $1 zillion, but they caught up with me eventually and went, "Hey, listen, we got $10,000-15,000 for you." That I didn't know was out there. So yeah, I think that your point is well taken on the idea of knowledge as it relates to financial activity and financial health, but more specifically, even the proactiveness of someone saying, "Hey, you shouldn't feel stupid because you got this thing. Vanderbilt should feel stupid for not making sure you got the money that was due to you."
Well, I definitely felt stupid, but it's not the first time. John, thank you for kicking us off.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. So I'm going to put you back as attendee. We're going to get Nuance fired up here as our next guest. And there's co-presenters here. So let me find both of them. Eduardo, welcome. And you're on mute. And Nirvana, same to you. Welcome to both of y'all. You're here, but you're on mute.
Hello, Bradley. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Eduardo. How are you?
Great, and you?
Doing good, doing good. We're running a little bit behind. It's unusual for us, but thank you for joining us. And Nirvana is here as well. You're on mute. Oh, there you go. Nirvana, how are you? Great name.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks to both of y'all. And who's got slides?
I'll go first. This is Eduardo.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to make you the host, Eduardo. Since that seems to be the easiest way to do this. And so you should be able to share your screen now. There you go. That looks great. Eduardo and Nirvana, thank you for being part of Voice of Money with us.
Our pleasure. So I think this is the perfect continuation to John's talk, because exactly what he was talking about in terms of this transition, these are the types of things that we're seeing. So what we wanted to do for this section is to talk about now both sides, the design side as well as the development side, because we feel that sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect here, especially because there's so much, I guess, hype when everybody's talking about conversational AI, and AI meaning so many things for so many different people, that we just wanted to kind of talk about both aspects and see how they fit into the whole picture for conversational systems as well as banking. So like you mentioned, my name is Eduardo Vera. I work on the Technical Advancement Group. I'm the director there for user experience, and we also have Nirvana, which is our director of software engineer, so we can bring both perspectives into the table. And just to begin, I think it's always a good idea to just kind of understand where we are, and again, just thinking about conversational design and what it really means. And we're kind of seeing three main kind of states of self-service when it comes to banking. The first one, and this should be pretty familiar, is that most financial institutions would love to be what we call channel-less, right? The reality is that right now, most of their advanced customers are not there yet. They're what I would call just a multi-channel. So basically, you can do the same things across other channels. And I think the reason for that is because they started getting demand from people that wanted to use channels or wanted to reach out to them based on things that were convenient to them. And that's how these financial institutions just kept adding more things. They started adding IVRs, and then agents, and then email, and then mobile, and chat, and SMS, and voice, and now smart speakers and smartwatches. So I think they've done a good job at extending their services across these channels. But I think the problem is that they very rarely connect all these systems or exchange data. Unfortunately, the customers, even though they are comfortable with all these channels, they're still expecting to have that single interconnected experience. The second challenge that we've seen is that, of course, the do-it-yourself wave, right? Everybody would like to be more agile. Everybody would like to create solutions that are faster and be more in control of their future. What we're seeing, though, is that in reality, some of these companies at this point are mostly experimenting. Many are really, you have the advantage now that we have all these core components that are become commodities. So you can do speech as a service, or you can do text to speech as a service, and you can have these natural language understanding systems as APIs. So it definitely saves you time and money and improves your response time. What we're seeing, though, is that many of these institutions are reporting issues or reporting challenges when it comes to the tools that they can use. They're also realizing that the skill set that you need is pretty unique, right? You need a specialized skill set to create these conversational designs or to create these models to be able to recognize things properly. And without actually even thinking about it, some of these companies are really becoming technology companies, even though that's not really their core business. So that's one of the challenges for kind of companies jumping into the do-it-yourself bandwagon. And finally, if you want to do both the omni-channel as well as do-it-yourself, everything has to rely on data. And I think the challenge here is that many companies would love to consolidate all their data and then being able to properly analyze it. But the challenge is that the whole data integration, I think, is work in progress. Very often you have these disparate systems. John was pointing to that. You know, you have the call centers, and then you have the people on the website and people on the mobile application, different stores and different data sources. And definitely there's a lot of manual work still going on. And unfortunately, the challenge is that once you get to that point where you're trying to create these conversational experiences, very often you end up with compromises, or you have to create workarounds because you have limited access to the data. So now that we kind of see where we are, I think, again, it's just worth kind of talking about what we mean by conversational design and why is it so hard, right? Why? Because the reality is we speak all the time, right? We're having a conversation right now. So how come I cannot just do the same thing I'm doing with you and just do it with a system? And that's one of the big challenges, that is there's kind of an art and science to creating these systems. And really the companies that get it, though, are really definitely seeing the benefits. Just to give you some examples, like we had a financial services company that they understood the ability of having, like John was talking about, being these predictive, thinking about the behaviors and really being able to assess the needs for the customers and really allowing them to self-serve, increasing the containment. So by increasing containment, in this case was with a telephone system, they actually saw a reduction of $5 million a year, at the same time delivering better quality of the solutions. We had another one. This is a financial institution and insurer. And they did a hard work of understanding that when you release a chatbot, it's not one of those things that you release and then you're set. They really understood that there's an organic exercise here, that you keep growing, you keep making it better, you keep looking at what your customers are doing. And eventually at this point, by choice, you have about 2 million customers switching, instead of picking the phone and calling you, going to digital channels, because for them it's more convenient at this point. And even in other verticals, we're seeing the same thing, like we're seeing with retailers. Again, related to banking, this retailer has their own credit card, and what they are doing is they're actually looking at your history of transactions. So when you're reaching out to them, they can actually predict with pretty good accuracy, about 45 to 47%. They can, which normally the average is about 35. They can tell you why it is you're reaching out to them. It can be because of a recent purchase. It can be because of a recent credit that you got. Because of maybe a recent return. Something happened that they are aware of, so that they can basically just tell you, are you reaching out to us because of this, without you having to say what it is you need. And then from the user side, right, it doesn't have to be kind of a compromise in here. There's actually a good case for a win-win here, because when you create these ideas and you create these solutions with the customers in mind, you can find all these benefits very easy. You can make things easier for them, which in return increases their engagement. You can see an increase in the adoption rate. You can see repeat usage. And then that gets reflected also in your customer satisfaction. So John was talking about how that's been getting affected right now with the changes in COVID. So again, you can take that up. And then in return, you can also, gain more trust from the customers, get an increased loyalty, and eventually, because people are started recommending you and giving you referrals. So now that you understand, you have the value on both sides, the business can do better, the users can do better. The question is, how do I go about this? And to me, this is kind of the biggest challenge when I'm talking to customers, because very often they tend to go with the technical question, right? Okay, I want to go into the smart speakers. How can I create a smart speaker experience? Or I got a new chatbot. What else can I do with this? In my honest opinion, I think that's the wrong question to be asking, because I think the reality is that companies really need to focus on not the technical aspects, but really you have to think in a more strategic way. So I'm going to ask you just for the next few minutes, just to kind of shift your gear and kind of think backwards with me. So let's say that instead of thinking about the tech you have or you would like to see, you start by identifying your user problems. What it is they're trying to solve? What's the pain they are suffering through today? Or what's the goal they want to reach? What is the thing you want to enable? Because people most of the time either move away from pain or they try to go closer to a gain. And by doing this, of course, that's the hat that I normally wear, is the user-centric hat, which is the businesses are going to be complicated. Transactions are hard. The question for you is, where do you want to put that burden? Do you want to pass that over to your customers, or do you want to take that on and just make it easier for them? Because by doing that, you're going to minimize the friction and you're going to maximize the efficiency. So now that we identify the problem and we have a goal, the second part is to apply what we call design strategies, or in this case specifically, it's conversational design strategies. And I think one nice way to think about these things here is to think like lenses, right? This is something where I'm going to take a slightly different perspective on what I have and what I'm trying to do. And again, looking at my specific problem and trying to see what sort of solutions can I come up with through this lens. Like if I take the one for speed and clarity, right? I'm trying to become more efficient. I'm trying to remove ambiguity from my system. I'm trying to get to the point. If I see a problem, how can I solve that to make my transaction faster, to make it clearer? Then I can take a different lens, right? I can maybe look at the courtesy one. If I'm trying to respect their time and be productive and anticipating their needs, what it is that I can do to solve that problem or to help them achieve that goal. For me, the biggest advantage is that when you start thinking this way from the problem or the goal, and then you apply these lenses, you're going to come up with a whole myriad of possible solutions. And then the products, the technologies, and the solutions or the services that you need become obvious to you. You don't have to force them. You have to justify them. Because if you want to deliver on that vision, then it becomes pretty clear what are the specific pieces and steps you need to get there. Let me just give you an example. So let's imagine that we have Sue here, right? Sue is a regular customer of the bank, but we have a couple of problems with her. Maybe first of all, she does not engage with us. Like John was talking about, right? People that just insist on going to the branches. They don't want to use digital channels. So for some reason, she doesn't engage. Also, she comes in with the expectation of a personalized experience. Maybe that's the reason she likes to go to the branch, because she gets a personalized experience from a person. When she talks to somebody on the phone or when he goes into the mobile application, maybe she doesn't feel that part. Or maybe just because when she tells us what she needs in automated ways, we have trouble understanding her and really being able to identify what it is that she wants to do with us. So I'm just going to take one of the lenses that I mentioned. I'm going to take the one about contextual awareness. So what that means is I'm going to focus on responding and behaving appropriately based on what I know about her so far, and also what has happened within my interaction, okay? My interaction with her at this point. So at the beginning, we talked about, how one of the problems is maybe she doesn't engage. Well, maybe I can start looking at my omni-channel touchpoints. Where are they coming from? Did they start on my website and then they had to call me? Or did I email them something and now they are reaching out through the mobile application? So it's understanding that omni-channel context. And also what happened today when she reached out to me first? What has she said so far? Has she provided me any additional clues of information beyond what I requested? Has she indicated that she wants to do more than one thing, which then I need to remember? So I'm just like a regular, what a regular person would do. I'm keeping my memory of what conversation we had so far. I can also look at her profile, right? There's going to be information in there. What do I know about her? What can I see from my records? What previous transactions she had? Is there anything upcoming that maybe she's not aware of? So to me, that means that I can look at her both in terms of the past, everything that we've done with her so far, the present, what she's doing today with us, but also the future. Again, maybe things that are coming up, a CD that is maturing or an account that is going to become due. So looking at her at the entire spectrum, I can play the role of the contextual awareness. And then, like I mentioned, once I identify the specific pains that I'm trying to solve and I look at them through my lens, then I can enable this and I can start to just brainstorm about possible solutions. Again, I'm not yet talking about the tech. So maybe proactive notifications is one answer, right? Maybe she doesn't engage. Well, I can kind of be the first one to start that conversation. I can send her something that is valuable, maybe something she's not aware of. The second part is maybe the identification. Maybe she wants to have that personalized experience, but I'm struggling because, I have to put you through the whole wrinkle of asking you for your birthday, your mother's birthday, your pet's name, your teacher's school's name. Maybe just by hearing your voice, I'm being able to tell who you are, I'm being able to identify who you are, or maybe looking at the device you're using. There's so many ways in which I can identify you at different levels and give you some level of service and value. And finally, if I'm having trouble really understanding you, there's a lot of technologies right now that really allow you to do very advanced, what we call intent recognition, being able to have that really deep natural language understanding that goes beyond just the typical pay my balance. So people can really feel like they are talking to somebody and giving you more information. And also, like I mentioned, being aware of the context. Like if I tell them, here's your account balance, and the person says, what about the other one? As a person, I would normally understand, yeah, you want to hear the balance of another account. So being able to understand those kind of very subtle, very natural utterances from users, that's really what's going to make a difference for you. And now that we identified what's technically required, the other part is we need also to make sure that we have the right tools and the processes to really deliver and develop these experiences. So for that, I'll have Nirvana, that he can walk us through kind of how does that look like when you have a tool that allows you to do things like this.
And Eduardo, I can make Nirvana the host, or you can make him the host. Do you see how to do that? If you don't, I'll just do it.
Yes,
I'll
please,
do it real
that'll be
quick.
better. Thank you.
Okay, and Nirvana. There you go. You're good.
Fantastic. Oh, 1 second. There we go. I lost my video in that transition. So let me. Thanks, Eduardo. Really appreciate that. So, as Eduardo shared, we've had a rich history in conversational AI. And so what we're really bringing broader to the community is an understanding of kind of the process and the methodology in delivering, and really thinking about customers first. And so as part of our journey at Nuance, we've been building a lot of these systems with the best companies and the best experiences out there. And we're excited to introduce and offer Nuance Mix, our conversational AI do-it-yourself platform. What's interesting about Mix is it's got really the best technologies, as Eduardo was saying. Granted, there's a process and methodology and a software development lifecycle, just like building a mobile application or a web application, building a conversational experience overlays on top of it. So as part of the platform, we offer natural language understanding, sort of a la carte, speech to text, text to speech, and of course the conversational AI dialogue that really strings together all those technologies with context, with an understanding and subtleties that you can design in. And then of course, supporting it through testing and learning and with the community. So when I say that Nuance has had a history and what we're proud to build and bring to the market is Nuance Mix, the do-it-yourself platform, we're really talking about appreciating and understanding the art and the science that goes behind developing these systems. And so really what is kind of described here on the left-hand side are all the things that provided you've either gone through the journey of building out a conversational experience, or you've had limited interactions. At the end of the day, you're sort of talking about specific personas, and you're dealing with speech and data scientists. You're talking about user interface design. You're talking about the notion of the feedback loop and optimizing it. And really the thought and care that goes into design is what drives the outcomes for the customers, right? The end users. So today, when we're talking about sort of a platform that's that's available for the entire platform of cohort of users, it's really talking about business users, business stakeholders understanding what has been produced and being able to stay agile and on top of it. really mixed dialogue is the instantiation of something that's novel, that's exciting, because it brings together an abstraction for designers, right? True designers to be able to design and craft these experiences per language, per channel, and per modality. So it's something that I'll touch on later. The developers, of course, are the ones that are integrating with the backends, the data, credentials and authentication and SDKs. Data and speech scientists are participating in the speech science, the actual tuning and optimization of language models. And of course, QA and testing is a function of being able to be agile in this platform. So really what I'm here to share, and Eduardo kind of provided the overarching kind of how to think about, what you're doing, is to just give a little sneak peek at Nuance Mix and give you guys a little insight. So, bear with a little bit of this crude architecture, but I put this up more for the technical folks that want to just get an understanding of the big picture of kind of what this thing is. And of course, we actually have many layers on top of solutions that integrate with, for example, live chat or, IVR voice systems and so on. But at its core, the Nuance Mix do-it-yourself platform is comprised of those 4 services. So ASR, speech recognition, NLU, natural language understanding, TTS, text-to-speech, and dialogue is sort of the orchestrator, right? That really is the reasoning and the engine that describes the design. As part of the application lifecycle, you can see in the bottom right is the tools, Nuance Mix, backed by APIs. So you can always automate and accelerate your own workflows. And hopefully this gives some understanding that the life cycle of development, goes through and sort of iterative in nature. And one of the key things that I'll note is that once you've developed in our SaaS, it is possible to take these services on premise, really enabling privacy and security and a whole lot of use cases that our customers are excited about. So if you can bear with me, I'm gonna go a little bit more free form here and share, let me share my browser. So I'm gonna jump right over to, if you can just give me the thumbs up, you can see my screen. Awesome, thank you. So this is Nuance Mix, welcome. I have a demo namespace and organization that I've created for myself. I'm gonna be doing a little bit something different. I don't know how it's gonna land, but I play around with crypto and digital assets. And so I've created a little bot here for myself that allows me to do certain operations for myself. What's interesting for me is in particular, not only the burgeoning space, but the actual language challenges. So being able to understand these new words, these new terminologies, these things that are coming up. Language is an ever evolving beast. And so being able to really stay on top of it, staying fluid, appreciating context, appreciating everything that's happening is a really interesting challenge. So here you kind of land at Nuance Mix. I was sharing a little bit earlier, but what we enable is the idea of having custom modalities. So sorry, custom channels. So you can see here an Omni VA, right, offers rich text. An audio script might be necessary for IVR. A TTS is something that you can use for generation. Interactivity describes some notion, whether on a TV or a watch or some kind of a device that has buttons, maybe web chat. DTMF, right, is a specific kind of interaction mode. And what we offer is the ability for you to really kind of come in and describe any number of channels and kind of modalities so that you can draw out your experience, really reusing and leveraging everything you have, but crafting the best design, the best experience for the end customer. Once you've selected the specific channels that you're interested in, we have a whole slew of languages that you can essentially import. That way you get the dimensionality of multiple languages, multiple channels, and multiple modalities all within one parent project, allowing you to really scale your overall conversational AI initiatives. So I won't go through the process of jumping here, but I would like to give you a quick tour of a few of the pieces. So, when you jump into Mix NLU, natural language understanding, it's really the act of classifying information and then tagging the actual annotations accordingly. So, how is the market cap doing? I can say, tell me a little bit about the bot, right? Give me some information about the price change, be able to, perhaps purchase an asset, right, with a certain amount and being able to leverage this in an overarching experience. So here's sort of the natural language model. There's a whole set of entities. I've got something called a crypto asset. That crypto asset has a whole list of digital assets that are listed. Sorry about that. working from home time. Okay, so happens, life happens. So I have these entities available in this that I've basically pre-trained, and you know, I've built up a model. So of course, when you're developing on the platform, I'm kind of talking about those personas. You're taking on those personas, but you know, obviously there's a richness and expertise and being able to get this to perform, you know, at an excellence sort of level. And so here's the natural language model. You know, I can of course go in here and test it out. What's the price of ETH, right? And it will go ahead and it will perform the natural language understanding and get you your information. So that's one domain of technology. The other is design and dialogue. So when you launch into mixed dialogue, you'll see a very visual interface. That visual interface allows you to sort of navigate the overarching landscape of experience. So you can see that if I wanted to understand how a price change of an asset, that I'd have to resolve getting the asset, that I'd have to do a data dip. And then based on that, I'd have some conditionality that I would share messages. And of course, I can craft them within the right channel and modality by leveraging the channel doc. So you get this rich design experience and this palette of nodes and capabilities that allow you to essentially craft your experience and then tackle, sort of solve the problem that's, you know, that's most important to the end users. And once you've done that, if I was to jump over and share a client that is illustrating the actual execution. So imagine now I've gone through the process of development. One second, share. So I've gone through the process of development. I've built something, I've deployed it, and now I'm launching into a client. So this is a demo client, but it's essentially you could imagine that this is you know, any experience that you have pulled together. In the ASR domain, right? Typically you'll have an interaction and you'll say, what's the price of Ethereum? And more often than not, they're not going to necessarily get that recognized. What is offered through Nuance Mix's ASR capabilities. So as you're building the overarching experience, is really tightening that overarching piece, and you can use things called domain language models. What's the price of Ethereum? And of course, by virtue of having trained it, classifying it, really like providing any additional intelligence, you can craft that right experience, making sure that the voice is perfectly accurate. Natural language understanding we touched on earlier. Text to speech is another piece, but if I was to just go sort of describing a little bit of the end-to-end bot here, I'm just going to launch into a session, and what it'll do, you won't be able to hear the text to speech, but based on the modality, I'm basically getting the audio in my ear, and it comes up here saying, hey, it notices I'm in New York based on my lat long, and kind of comes in right using that context. So how can I be of service? What is the price of Ethereum right now? And so what's happening here is it's taking the ASR, it's ensuring that that's accurate. It goes back, really parses everything, right? Goes through that overarching experience, and then goes to a data backend access, gets the information, comes back. Yes. I can also, of course, go through any other modalities, right? So I can say, you know, what's the market cap? And of course, I'm in the context of dealing with this specific asset, so it can kind of resolve that and keep context, right? And your overarching design plays out very many different use cases. But the last piece that I wanted to just illustrate is that once you've kind of gone through this overarching experience, so I can say blah, blah, right? And it can, of course, escalate and a whole bunch of other things take place. But once you've actually gotten, you know, some development underway, really it's part of that life cycle of an iterative development life cycle. So once you get back into the tool, you get to go and this is the project that was in the natural language domain, right? And of course, if I select the sandbox and I apply the filter, it will start showing you the information that's coming in so that you can start really collecting and using that and enhancing your overarching experience. There's a gradation from going from a simple bot to the enterprise grade bots that, you know, a lot of the what Eduardo shared, right, is really adding ROI and value. But we're really excited to be able to bring this toolkit, being able to bring this platform to more developers and more consumers so that the experiences and the design can really be brought to bear. And what we're enabling here is a do-it-yourself platform, but, you know, Nuance is here to help with thought leadership and execution and delivery in general. And so this is an instantiation for us that we're really proud of to bring to market.
Gentlemen, that was excellent. So I'm gonna hit reclaim host here. I got a question for you before I let you off the hook. And you may want to unshare. There you go. Yeah. So Eduardo and Nirvana, that was great. So really interesting demo. And Eduardo, your slides is what I'm actually going to ask about. So you showed a slide that talked about the different dimensions and different strategy. The slide was called conversational AI strategies or something. The word strategies was on the slide. And one of them had to do with speed. And I saw a tweet from some venture capital guy a couple of months ago, and it's been something that I've thought about off and on. And what he wrote was, somebody could create a voice assistant that only competes on speed of response and be successful. And I thought that was pretty interesting because, like with some of the more mainstream ones, especially the Amazon one, I won't say the name, it can be slower. And just the concept of competing on speed, which you echoed in your slide, I thought was really interesting. I just thought I would ask you your thoughts on that.
I guess I would just caveat it. To me, it's not speed for speed's sake, because you can definitely speed things up. There is a technical advancement that you can do. In my mind, what I mean by speed is because you're removing steps from the conversation that are not necessary. Very often people say, can you show me the most advanced, most complex conversation you can think of, right? This is your job. And they think I'm joking when I tell them my ideal world is when the system comes back and says, hey, Bradley, I see that you made a purchase yesterday. You're probably calling in to set it up. You need help with that. And all you have to do is say yes. To me, that's a speed, right? I'm not asking you unnecessary questions. I don't have to take you through the whole gauntlet of asking you 15 questions or identify who you are and understanding your intent and collecting an item. Like, if I can really take all the information that I know about you, I can really speed up your interaction. The other part of why I have it speed is because also speed, I think, is something very subjective. When you're in a situation where you get stuck, when you don't get understand, that you have to try multiple times, time just feels eternal, right? When you're waiting for something to happen, like you said, it feels unnatural. When you show progression, regardless of how many turns it takes, in people's minds, something is speedy because they feel they're moving ahead. So that's one of the kind of the artistic sides or the tricky sides about these designs, that the speed is sometimes also very relative. You can show somebody, oh, it only took you 20 seconds. Yeah, but I was waiting, 15 out of those. So it just feels very sluggish and very slow. So that's what I meant.
Yeah, no, that's great. So as they say, brevity is the soul of wit. Isn't that right? That's the line. Eduardo, Nirvana, thank you very much for being part of the Voice of Money with us. Great job.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Bradley, thank you.
You got it. So I'm going to put y'all back as attendees. And Nirvana, let me click on you. There you go. And next up, we have John Foster of IQdo. And I'm clicking on him. And John, you are here and you're on mute. There you go. John, how are you?
Good, Bradley. How's it going?
Pretty good. Good to see you. So I'm going to make you host.
Alrighty. I'm going to share my screen and put up a few slides here.
Perfect. So there you go.
All right. Let me get to. There I am. All right. Can you see my screen?
Looks great. John, thanks for being part of the Voice of Money with us.
Yeah, you bet. No, glad to be here, and thanks for inviting me. So I wanted to address a little bit about voice specifically in mobile apps. We started IQdo 3.5 years ago to focus specifically on voice enabling mobile apps. And when we started the company, the consumer voice experience was really sort of defined by Alexa and the skills model. And it had a bunch of issues, right? Discovery was a problem. Syntax could be a problem to invoke the action that you or the skill that you wanted. And then, privacy has become an increasingly large problem in the minds of consumers for these devices that are always listening. So we thought a better approach to introducing voice as a UI and really, enabling it in high value circumstances for consumers was to start with mobile apps. Obviously the phone is ubiquitous; it's always with us. We use our mobile apps all the time. The advantages then are you've got the device problem solved, right? You never leave your living room and your Echo behind, and we're really familiar with our apps. We know exactly what they can do, and so if the only task for the consumer is to think of a command to invoke an action, focus on the action that you want to get done. We don't even require a user to use the app name. You can just say, I need a ride to the airport, or all the variations on that. I need to get to the airport. I need a car to the airport. You can even say, I need an Uber to the airport, but you don't have to. And then we'll surface the right action in the right app. And if you use Uber and I use Lyft, and we both say, I need a ride to the airport, it'll find the right ride sharing app for me as well as for you, even based on the same command. So that was kind of the origin here of where we started the company, and what's been our primary focus, since we've really gotten going here. So I think probably everybody on this call would be, aligned with this, that voice, there's really going to be a big platform shift here, and voice is going to become how we interact with our technology as a primary way. And this shift is going to be dramatic, right, on par with the web and mobile. And what we've seen in the evolution of voice is that as voice is first deployed, it's sort of one of several modalities that are available. There's different ways that you can interact, and voice is an option. But what we've seen, and particularly with our deployment with Motorola, where the voice interface is good and it really works. I mean, you hear all kinds of complaints about, this assistant sucks and that assistant sucks. But if it works, then people very rapidly start to experiment. And we saw this at Motorola in the different countries that we launched in. For the first 3 weeks, what we saw were exactly the use cases they promoted, music, Facebook, chat, messaging, those kinds of things. And then after that, when people realized, hey, this works, what else can I do with it? And then we saw this really long tail of all these different things that people wanted to do with voice. Some of them, they didn't even have, they're asking for shows on Netflix and they don't have the Netflix app, or they live in a country that you can't get Netflix. But this is what they wanted to do, right? So you really started to see all this experimentation and the real sort of adoption of voice as a rapid thing to experiment with. But then what we see is voice does become then a primary way of interacting, right? This is the behavioral change that voice requires. And once people start using voice to call, call Bradley, or tell Bradley, hey, I'm running 10 minutes late, those things that you can do with voice, it's just faster and easier. That's, people just don't go back, right? And this is where we think of voice becoming an OS. And this was a little bit what John Best was talking about earlier this morning. Voice connects us to all these disparate actions and services. And so it might be an action in an app. It might be, something in the cloud that you're talking to. It might be your device itself. Turn on my hotspot, turn on airplane mode. As consumers, we don't care. We want to get actions done, and voice helps us get those actions done. And so in this way, you can sort of picture the way WeChat has connected together a bunch of services through the ecosystem that they control. Voice connects together a bunch of different services. For the consumer, all these actions that we want to do, instead of living in these little silos of an app or a web service, now they just become a fabric of interactions that exist all around us, and we just pick the ones we want and we keep moving with our day. That's really the promise of voice for us. So as far as voice in apps, clearly this is the direction that the industry is recognizing, right? Google announced a big expansion of actions that you can reach from Google Assistant directly into third-party apps. Amazon has announced this big program for Alexa for apps, which is clearly a recognition that voice is going to happen on the phone, and that Amazon is trying to get into that game by making Alexa an assistant on the phone to enable you to get to apps. And then industry analysts, this has really become recognition in the past few months that voice and apps is really going to happen here, and this is really where the high value place is for voice. So what we've seen, voice has actually already come to banking, right? With Erica and with US Bank. Erica was launched in April 2018, and they're up to 12 million users already, and the usage is growing rapidly. as well as the feature set is growing rapidly. It started just basic things, check my balance, those kinds of things, going to a much more comprehensive set of services that are now accessible through voice. So what's my credit score, or I want to manage my budget through voice apps. So it's becoming much more comprehensive, and what we're seeing is the latent demand for voice, right? With the adoption that particularly Erica has seen, if you had asked me, 3-4 years ago, which sets of apps will be the lead with voice and voice adoption, finance and banking would not have been, at the top of my list. But what we're seeing is that these are frequent interactions, and voice is just handier and easier to deal with your banking. And so we're seeing this latent demand and latent demand for voice. And so that's why I think we're seeing this take off. And if it exists in finance, it exists in lots of other places. For voice and banking in particular, there are some things that are going to accelerate this change here. And if you think of these, challenger banks or app-based banking, whatever you want to call them, their value prop is really convenience, right? It's getting your banking done. It's their consumers who view banking as a set of tasks, and they just want to get them done quickly. And their target customers don't care about seeing a branch with stone pillars and that sort of thing. What they want is just to get the stuff done fast. And so with the target demo in particular of these app-based banks, these folks are going to take to voice just really quickly, right? Because it's simple for them. They're not at all sort of intimidated by the technology, and they're just going to move quickly on this. And they're going to find that voice is just faster and easier. So the ways that we think about adding value in your app itself are the immediate access to the frequently used actions, right? Making payments, showing my balance. It turns out that banking apps are, I think I read something like the 8th most frequently used apps out of all of them on a monthly and daily basis. There's just things that people use very frequently. And the beauty with voice and learning a new UI is, if it's something you do frequently, you learn how to do it quickly. If it's something you do infrequently, you forget, oh, geez, how did I do that last time? And so getting an app or a set of apps that have a frequent set of use cases where people are going to just change their behavior and engage with voice, now that opens the door to the different things that people will try and do with apps and voice in apps. And those, particularly with banking apps, right, they're very rich. There's lots of content there. And so there's things that you do infrequently, like putting a travel alert in your car, or what's my routing number. They're there somewhere in the app. And if you have to tap your way to find it, it can be pretty frustrating. But if you can just jump to it with a voice command, that's ideal, right? That's what consumers want. And then there are those circumstances where, for the banks, they're trying to sort of, shield their customer care centers and their customer care costs in particular. But there are times when the consumer just wants to speak to a person. And so we can do handoffs where, call customer service, let me speak to an agent, or you can route it to a chatbot, which chatbots typically have, sort of informational service functions. How do I send a wire transfer? How do I do this or that? Those are typically cues that there's a chatbot that's going to help you through that. And that's going to be a good experience as well. So these are the different things that we think of that are high value for voice in apps. And thinking about sort of apps versus, building out a standalone voice assistant. And I think of Erica as this, standalone thing. And we know B of A spent a lot of money on it. I've heard a bunch of different, kind of numbers, and I don't know what's really accurate, but I think a lot is probably pretty close to it. What we see is, rather than build out this kind of standalone assistant, the way to approach this could be for banks just to voice enable your app, right? The apps are already familiar to their users, and so it's easy for them to kind of understand, all right, what can I do with voice? Because the app has sort of conceptualized this for you, right? I know that the app does all these things, and if there's a microphone button there, I know I can do them with voice. And so the app sort of helps to provide a kind of a structure, a guide for the user. For the bank, excuse me, you're leveraging your existing technology infrastructure, right? your tech stack already exists around the app that you built. You don't need to build some kind of parallel entity here as a voice assistant. You're also looking at leveraging the knowledge that you have of your customer flows through your app, right? Where do they abandon? How do you improve that? If you have now a new set of customer flows through a voice assistant, now you've got to learn all that stuff again. What happens in the assistant and why is that different? And then really where that comes together is now you have to say, all right, as we're looking at our interactions with our customers that come through our different touch points with them, they're all feeding into our AI. And if you've got kind of two sets of actions that may be similar or they may be slightly different, it's hard to tell. Are you getting the same signal about why does the consumer drop off in the app at this point and they abandon in the assistant at this other point? Is it the same problem? Have we not served their needs? Is it just something wrong with the interface? You just created a more difficult problem for your AI. And at the end of the day, these voice platforms are really data collection for your AI. They're your consumer touch points. As voice experiences become ubiquitous, right? We just get accustomed to using voice and it becomes a very fluid way for us to interact with our technology. Then you're going to see lots of voice commands. And this is the example that I gave with Motorola, where people start to experiment and they just start to talk to their technology. At that point, capturing all of those interactions, all those different things they say, whether they're things that you can serve but aren't now, you should do that. There are things that you can't serve and you won't serve. You should come up with a way to treat them and say this is not within our domain or whatever it is. And you just need to be able to field all those touch points so that you really get a good comprehensive view of what's going on with your consumer. What are they asking for? What do they want to do? So that you can deepen that personalization. And one of the things that John was talking about is these generalized AI where it's going to read your mind. No, it's not. That's going to be frustrating for a long time. But in a very specified and specialized AI, where you can see exactly what the consumer is doing, now you can start to personalize to that individual in this small domain that you're working in. And it just reinforces that convenience of this is really the way I want to interact with my technology. So we have a voice graph, we call it, which underlies all of our platform, where we're collecting information about what are people doing with voice. And it's quite interesting to see how people in Brazil, for example, are using voice differently than the way people in India are using it. And that's what you're capturing with we call our voice graph, and with these voice platforms. Excuse me. And so just a quick ad about IQdo. We are a customizable voice assistant. It's a white label platform. We serve your brand. We can create it how you like it. Our tech platform consists of a natural language understanding engine that's focused on intent detection. So we don't do ASR. There's lots of ASRs out there that'll serve very, very well. We can sort of ride the quality and the investment that's made in those ASRs that are out there. But we're focused on what's the user's intent, and then on the action execution side, where's the right place to go and execute that action. And we started initially with mobile apps. We've added cloud services and APIs. We have system actions we can support. And that all kind of exists on the action execution side of our platform. And then we have in the center of it our AI, which is our voice graph to collect information and collect customer insights, understanding their needs, understanding what additional needs we could be filling. And then we tie it all together in our AI to help us better understand, better personalize to each of these consumers that we see. So I think that's pretty much what I've got, and I can take questions and I can get you back on schedule a little bit more. Looks like, Bradley.
Yeah, no, that's great, John. Nice presentation. So I just hit reclaim host. If you want to unshare your screen, I think I don't really know if it's so much of a question as it's just a comment. And you and I have talked about this before, that I think we're about to see a surge of companies integrating voice into their apps. downloads and app usage had been on the decline for a number of reasons. And I think that if not for any other reason, just to revitalize the mobile app experience, voice will be integrated. I think people will be looking all around and seeing all this touchless stuff to come, and that will inform the process of adding voice to apps. I think there's a lot of different ways to get there, but I think that you're pretty well positioned for that. That was a great presentation.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I agree that consumers' expectations are going to become having voice available to them in their app, right? And so if you're an app developer, you can try and rely on Google Assistant or Siri shortcuts or something like that. But I think that's probably going to pose some risk to you in terms of you're running the risk of being disintermediated, right? Because voice is going to be the search market all over again. And both me and my CTO and my CSO all came from the search world. We saw this play once before, and it's going to happen exactly the same way again, right? The big platforms are going to try and own all the traffic. And for app developers, the challenge will be keeping your user, right? And making sure that it's your user and you're providing a voice experience in your brand. And people talk about your voice brand, and this is exactly what's starting to happen here, and it'll happen in apps first.
That's great. And there's a gentleman in the chat that's asking you where he can check out a multilingual iQdo app. I'm going to let you throw that in the chat and respond to him. John, great to see you. Great job. I'm going to put you back as attendee.
Sounds great.
And next up, we've got Dimitris from Omelia, and let me promote him. Dimitris, how are you?
Hi, Bradley. I'm well.
There you go. Thank you for, nice to meet you. And you got a really interesting company. Thank you for being part of the Voice of Money with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You got it. So I'm going to make you the host so you can share your screen.
There we go.
Okay, and we can still see all that. Oh, yeah, that works if you want to do that.
Sorry, just give me a moment.
No, you're good.
There we go. Is that better?
Go. That's perfect. Dimitris, okay, thank you very much.
So guys, what I want to do today is talk a little bit about conversational AI and where I think as a technology, where it's going. And to do that, I'll take a step back a little bit and look at how the technology has developed. I will, first of all, it's important to define what I mean by conversational AI, and and what's the mystery behind it, because there's a lot of people and customers that I talk to, and they're all somehow tasked to do something with conversational AI, but they're looking exactly how to do it and what to do sometimes. So I'm going to focus on intelligent virtual assistants. So I'm going to focus on a little bit technology that allows you to provide customer service to consumers automatically with the technology rather than a human, but still having human-like experience. And when I'm asked what Omelia does, the best response I've given was last year, and I'm quoting myself here, that we're in the business of destroying IVR as the legacy experience that we all love to hate, and we're rediscovering IVR or the voice interaction as a new digital channel. And that's what conversational AI I think is enabling today. So I'll take a step back with technology, and I'm old enough to have seen several technology eras in my time. So when I was just in university, I think it was the time where the PC, the personal computer, was being born. So the history of the PC and how that technology era evolved is very close to me, and something that I witnessed firsthand. And I remember PCs at the beginning, very clunky, expensive. The performance, the memory you would get was in the kilobytes. Now it's many, many zeros beyond that. So I've seen a timeline of the personal computer from the trigger point, the innovation trigger back in 1981 with the IBM PC, through to when processors became much more I think powerful with the Pentium. And then I saw an explosion. I was still, I think, a student there, or maybe I wasn't. I was just off university. There was a big explosion of all these different components that you could go to. And I was studying in London. So, I would go down to Tottenham Court Road, which was the street with all the electronic shops. And you could literally buy any component you wanted and put them all together to compose the PC of your dreams, really, or supposedly, because as soon as you composed it and you try to put software, the operating system on it, you had to go through this device driver hell, which some of you may remember, where things started to break down because compatibility issues and no testing, and it was really the democratization of technology, seemingly, but really what was happening is everybody, all the consumers, were forced to become an IT specialist. And of course, this didn't last for long, because people saw the gap in the market. They understood what was going wrong. And people like Steve Jobs with Apple, they came up with integrated best of class packages and said, well, don't bother becoming an IT guru and putting together your PC. Here's one which actually works pretty well for most people. And I think that paradigm then was followed by a lot of companies, and not just in the personal computer market, but things like smartphones with the iPhone and all the explosion that happened there. And I parallelized that historical, if you like, timeline of the personal computer era with what's happening in AI today. And I think the trigger point, in my opinion, for AI was, just about in 2003, when, there was a little bit of, I think, a breakthrough in terms of the neural network training algorithms. Plus the fact that computers were becoming fast enough that made neural networks actually start to work. Neural networks are definitely not invented in 2003, but previously they didn't work that well. So that was a trigger point and thing. And of course, IBM, threw a lot of marketing money into making sure that people, knew what was happening with IBM Watson. If you remember the Jeopardy TV series where, IBM Watson beat the best human in Jeopardy. And that was a big deal, I think, from a marketing perspective, because people started to understand what AI means for the consumer. And, others followed with Siri and Watson in 2011. And then I saw this, again, this explosion of all the different vendors, components, services, a big proliferation out there, which led to a lot of confusion, because there was so much and so approachable, if you like, technology out there, that it was really, again, coined, I heard the term democratizing AI. So the way that I experienced that is I saw a lot of the clients that I'm, talking to, they were spinning internal projects to try out Google, try out Amazon, try out Microsoft, all the AI and cognitive services, and see what they can do by themselves, what they can, pull together and experiment, really. And again, although this is still happening, I think we are seeing now people, having done a lot of experimentation, having almost become gurus in putting together these services, and of course understanding the shortcomings of DIY assembly of a personal computer. Really, they're now understanding that there must be a better way. There must be something that somebody has thought of, which is a best of class integrated package. And I think that's where we are today. There is, of course, a great deal of platforms out there that allow you to develop voice bots. There's tens of thousands of voice bot developers at least. There's at least 150 bot platforms that I've counted very, very quickly on the internet. And I bet there is more than 1,000 voice developers today around the world that are spending their time developing voice bots for financial services. And if you think about what they're doing, all of them are doing exactly the same thing. They're just rediscovering the wheel. We have 1,000 people doing exactly the same thing every day. They're building intent models, and they're providing utterances like, what's my balance? I lost my card. I want to pay my bills. I want to transfer money. All of them are developing exactly the same machine learning models with very, very little differences between them. So, that's an exhilarating experience, I think, because, people are feeling like they are empowered and, they can put together the motorcycle of their dreams, and it's a great experience. But at the end of the day, where does that get you in terms of business benefits? And where do you go next so that you can take that into the market and, with real customers, with the complexity of the real world, and get results? And I think there's, quite one way to do that, and that's to really understand what is the real recipe for putting together something that will eventually have user adoption at a wide scale. And speakers before me talked about the voice user interface, and it's definitely a different animal. It's definitely a daunting experience to design something and to implement something that's gonna be able to understand the chaotic behavior of humans. And doing that also, I think a lot of speakers before me said, it doesn't just take technology, it also takes art. So, the vui experience, I think, is super, super important. And it's definitely something that's right at the top of my recipe. Strong algorithms, yes, of course, you need to have strong algorithms that can provide, good machine learning models with good accuracy. But we also, touched upon general AI and specialized AI, and I'm very much of the same mindset myself, because the name of the game, I believe, is specialization. You have to, if you want to be good at something or good enough for prime time, you definitely need to specialize. And how do you specialize? Where today it's all data driven. So you need to have a lot of real data, not just any data, but the real data. And a lot of the times, I talk with customers and they say, but, Google has the most data in the world, and, nobody has more data than Google. And that may be true, but, there's data and then there's data. And when it comes to a specialized task, you really have to have specialized data. You really need to have the right kind of data. So if we're talking about, for example, a voice bot in the contact center, you need contact center data. And there's no way you can do it otherwise with other data. There is no substitute for the real thing. And of course, once you have data, you need more data. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to really have a lot of the real right kind of data. And having an integrated platform, I think, is also quite an important ingredient. I think speakers before me also touched upon the was it John that said it's a tough nut to crack, the call center integration. So, you know, when you're putting together your DIY solution, you definitely do not want to go near telephony and integrating to telephony. That's you know, it's not fun. It's a difficult task with you know, a lot of pitfalls. So you really need to know what you're doing there. And of course, once you have all that, you need iterations. You need to mature the whole proposition, the whole solution. You need to be exposed to the real world with real data, real customers, see how the whole thing works, and go back to the drawing room, improve, get more data, tune. And by doing this process continuously, you gain a good understanding of, you know, where it is you have to go. And of course, love and care, I think, is super important. You have to have a real love for customer service. You have to really want to be in the shoes of the end user on the other side of the AI and understand how they feel, what they want to do, and whether you're really developing and designing something that's right for them. But you know, the way that we solved this problem, and don't get me wrong, this is a recipe here that it may take 10, 15 years to put together, right? So this is definitely not something that you do in the course of a single project. It's something that requires quite a lot of investment over the years. The way that we solve this in our recipe is, of course, to go to the cloud, because offering something from the cloud, it means that you can offer a single solution to many customers. And when you're tuning a single solution, everybody is benefiting. So the idea of having this building this AI and then sharing it across the market is something which enabled us, at least, to focus and get to the next level. And our proposition to solve this problem was, you don't need to DIY. You don't need to even be a voice user interface expert. You don't need to join the DIY wave, and you don't need specialized services for someone who knows what they're doing to do it for you. We package technology and know-how into reusable components, which we call mini apps, and they're specialized. So each one of these blocks is a specialized AI that's so specialized that it's extremely good at doing one specific task and no more. And then really what we are doing is, we're saying, with these components, you can now put together any conversational AI experience you want, and you don't need to worry about voice user interface. You don't need to have designers. It works itself out based on best practices. And a key moment in that journey for us was not long ago, a couple of months ago, with one of our customers, where we built a voice bot and deployed it for them. It's one of the US largest used car retailers, a Fortune 500 company. They wanted natural language understanding for their IVR. And we built something, you know, very, very quickly for them based on mini apps. Basically, we went from hello to to going live in a matter of a few weeks. And the accuracy that we got out of the box was above 90%. So, and this is writing zero code. We didn't even write a single line of code, and the customer didn't have, of course, to write any code themselves. So the big validation to this journey came a little bit later when we deployed that, where this customer, not accidentally, we had given them access to monitoring the solution and seeing, how the voice bot is responding to to their customers' requests. And they, I think they just poked around a little bit on our platform, and they found out how we had developed this experience for them. And because I'm based out of Athens, so this is a US based customer, so we're in different time zones. During their business day, we are, sleeping. Well, I work in 2 time zones, but most of the team is sleeping when the US is doing business. So they had the opportunity to go into the platform and just look around while nobody, from our team was there. And they decided that they had a good understanding and enough understanding of what was happening to just change a few things and deploy them. And they did change the voice bot. They cloned it. They changed a few prompts. They changed a few settings. They changed the error handling of the virtual assistant. And then they took it live traffic. And just like that, hot plug, without any, ever asking any of the Omilia folks. And the next morning we came into the office and we saw that, the application we had developed was not taking any calls. So we were naturally alarmed and were trying to figure out, what has failed. And of course, nothing had failed. It was just the whole traffic was redirected to a different application that, the customer had themselves developed. And that was a wow moment, because at that point, I understood that the platform we had given this customer didn't require any designers, definitely didn't require any developers. It didn't require any speech scientists. It didn't require building any specialized speech recognition grammars or any intent models or specialized NLU models, nothing. The customer was able to just go in, change, all the magic happens in the background, and they even felt comfortable enough to deploy in production. So, in the words of the client, what they found very, very, I think, highly valuable from the platform is that the interface is very intuitive and easy. And it is so because they don't have to deal with any of the AI. You don't see the AI, you don't have to. The AI is advanced enough to be able to understand and adapt itself to whatever the business user, business analyst is trying to do. And having simplicity also helps you have better understanding of what happens, because you get these very, very advanced conversational AI platforms with 1,000 buttons and 1,000 fields, 1,000 screens, and it becomes very daunting. You need to really get trained and understand how to use those very, very advanced tools. So having something simple is a lot of the times gives you a much better understanding as to what is happening, and gives you more confidence that what you're doing, what you're doing really, and more confidence to take it into production. So to close off, I think, having seen the evolution of different technologies over the years, what we are aiming to bring to conversational AI is definitely the best of class human-like conversational experiences. That is definitely the #1 target for Omilia. State-of-the-art accuracy, because when you deal with customers, they need to be understood, and customers are very demanding. We are providing built into our service, all the terabytes of data that we have collected over the years and trained expert models. You don't have to worry about getting data, because that's all what we provide. And of course, when you have all these, your speed to market is in days rather than months, and no coding approach. I think that's also an important differentiation.
Demetrius, that's a great job. And let me, I'm going to hit reclaim host, and there you go. Yeah, it was interesting to see your walk through history, and this is the first time just seeing you present, and just how you described the evolution of computing, and then how that led you to everything that Amelia does. I thought that was excellent. So I don't really have a question, just a comment. Well done, and thank you for being part of the Voice of Money with us.
Thanks, Bradley. Thank you.
You got it. So I'm going to put you back as attendee. And next up is McCall from Interactions. And let me find her. McCall, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing fine. I can see you. There you go. Perfect. Thank you for being part of the Voice of Money with us.
Of course. I'm happy to be here.
I'm going to make you the host. There you go. And so you can share your screen.
All right. 1 second.
Sure. Perfect. Looks great.
Seeing that okay?
That looks perfect. And thank you for being part of the show with us.
Awesome. Thank you. So my name is McCall Peltier, and I'm a product marketing manager at Interactions. Today, I'm just going to be walking through how conversational AI and automation has the ability to transform in financial services and through payment collection. So I'm really excited to kind of chat through some of that this afternoon. Before I get into the presentation, I wanted to set the scene on like what's going on in the market right now. And I know it's been a crazy year. The first two stats you'll see in yellow, the first being the fact that consumer debt's grown to a tremendous number of over $14 trillion. And then the later stat, which is basically that 33% of consumers used their tax refund this year to pay a debt. These are just proving that we're in unprecedented financial times, and there's such an intense financial pressure for consumers right now, and it's going to affect their ability to make payments in the future. And of course, this was amplified by COVID-19, and we'll only see these stats grow over time. So it's really important for financial institutions to be thinking about the way that this is going to affect their customer interactions and their abilities to collect payment over time as well. And then these next two stats are a little bit more inward facing for contact centers. We generally see about a 30 to 45% churn rate as an industry standard. But when we're talking about contact centers that are collecting payments, that churn rate nearly triples. It's a very dramatic effect. We speculate that it's because it's a really stressful environment. Customers are often frustrated, taking that out on contact center agents. And really, there's a lot of repetition and monotony, which just leads to a general lack of engagement. So there are more intense churn rates in this space, but it's still the largest expense, payroll. And that doesn't even take into account the cost of having to mitigate these high churn rates by hiring more, training, et cetera. So this is a huge cost on contact centers, and churn only amplifies that. And then these last two stats are focused on a shift in customer preference. And I think this is particularly interesting. In a study that we conducted with Harris Poll, we found that about 25% of consumers prefer to speak to a virtual agent opposed to a human agent when dealing with a financial inquiry that could be embarrassing or uncomfortable, as many payment collection processes could be. So this is a really good use case for applying automation in this space. And then additionally, about 70% say that if the AI is effective, they don't need to interact with a live agent at all. And I think this is, so these are from 2019, these stats. I was actually reading a Gartner report last week that cited that by 2022, 85% of customer interactions will start with self-service. So this isn't going away, right? Customers now preferences have shifted. They want to self-serve. They want to do things quickly and efficiently. And conversational AI and automation have the capability to support that. These are just a few of the drivers for disruption that we're seeing in the market right now. I'm going to start with regulation because it's so important for financial services firms. And it's even more important when we're talking about the use case of payment collection. There has to be the right processes and technologies in place to make sure that all of that sensitive personal data is secure and compliant, as well as there's trust in the system that things won't be fraudulent. I know we've seen a lot of major headlines in the past about companies being dinged and fined for not complying, and they've obviously had to pay the price for that. And I did talk about the hiring challenges in the last slide, but of course, like burnout and churn with in the space is just amplifying all issues because then there's a lack of human resources to actually support call volume. And then it's just kind of like compounding over time. Brands are still having to bear the cost of high wages. It is a huge expense. When there's surges in volume, there also is a high cost of having to scale up to meet some of that volume. So that's obviously a place for disruption as well. And then lastly, we're just in a time of like utter uncertainty. There's high unemployment rates, there's rises in delinquency and losses over time, and consumers just in general are having a hard time making payments, and that won't be going away anytime soon. So it's really amplifying or adding to the uncertainty and the need to disrupt. And here at Interactions, we believe that we're poised to actually support that disruption through our virtual collection agent, which we actually brought to market July of this year. But the virtual collection agent, or you'll hear me refer to it as VCA, it has the ability to increase the payment collections without compromising customer experience at all. So here at Interactions, we're in the business of applying technology to improve customer experience, and the VCA does just that, while also supporting some of the operational benefits for financial services companies. And I would like to walk everybody through a little bit of a high level for how it works. Obviously, this isn't a super technical diagram, but I do think it makes sense to kind of show a little bit of the way in which we're able to execute this. So the VCA operates using a seamless blend of conversational AI that's highly sophisticated and human intelligence through human adaptive understanding. And every interaction begins with "How may I help you?" So that really puts customers at the center of each interaction, which is really important if you want to maintain that high CSAT. But then additionally, we're able to act as your best agent at scale through standardized integrations. The only way that the VCA can act as your best agent at scale is if it has access to the same information that an agent does on their desktop. So integrations with things like FICO and CRM systems, payment systems, that just means that each interaction with the customer is personalized and consistent and has all the necessary information included in it without having to ask for a customer to repeat anything. So that's a huge differentiator and actually allows us to have a seamless integration with or a seamless interaction with a customer. And then we also have a customizable negotiation engine. And this is really interesting because it has the capability to increase the monetary value of payments collected in a very humane, judgment-free way, of course. But it works with customers to create a payment arrangement that works for them. And it always aligns to the brand and persona that a firm deploys, but it's able to kind of have that back and forth integration following business rules to improve, the increase in collection over time. And then lastly, there is a reporting and analytics portal that provides insight and information on the customer transactions that were taken through VCA, as well as any other inquiries or customer journey information that may be provided. So that's sort of a high level overview of what this looks like. And like I said, we believe that VCA behaves like your best agent at scale. And we see the benefits of that obviously affecting end users, but over time, we've seen the benefits actually trickle down to agents as well. And the VCA has the capability to improve human agents' productivity for a number of reasons. But automation is meant to work in harmony with humans. And the VCA can take over these data-driven, very transactional tasks. And then it allows human agents to refocus on things that require a little bit more human reasoning or human touch. And that's obviously more invigorating for a human agent as well. So we see a reduction in churn rates on top of all of the other operational benefits that the VCA brings. And these are just few of the reasons why it performs like your best agent at scale. One, of course, is 24/7 availability, right? It's always on. It doesn't matter when a customer is contacting. It's always going to have the same manner and empathy, and the brand persona is always going to be on. So, it just never has a bad day. It also doesn't need constant training or tuning. It has access to all backend systems and data sources, which is really important for personalization. And I think most importantly in this space and for financial services, it's always compliant. So there are no mistakes, right? It always says the right thing. And that's really important when we're talking about an industry where regulation does change frequently. The VCA is able to stay on top of that based on business rules. So like I said, it has the capability to perform as your best agent at scale. And that's really important when we're talking about balancing the benefit between operational efficiency, but also inside the contact center in the way in which agents perceive automation. It's often there's misconceptions in contact centers where it could be scary or frightening to hear that AI is being deployed, but we find that agents are actually excited and they rely on VCA and conversational AI to support them in their day-to-day because they see such a dramatic improvement to their productivity. And I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about the benefits for financial services firms, the first being an increase in payment collection. So through things like the customizable negotiation engine and just our very sophisticated conversational AI stack, we're able to collect payments in a very sophisticated, humane, judgment-free way. And that's really important because customers are able to call at any time to interact with VCA, and they can self-serve whenever they choose. And our clients only pay when the transaction is successful. So this ends up reducing the burden on IT over time. And it's a huge value drivers for our customers. And I do keep talking about the operational costs, but because VCA is adding automation, agents are able to refocus. It reduces the operating expenses over time, but it does so without compromising your customer experience at all. It honestly improves CX over time because of that consistent experience. And we know that regulation is super important in this space. And because VCA is always compliant and follows rules consistently, it is the most secure way to collect payment. But there's also benefits for the end user too, which we can't forget. So this is a very natural and conversational approach because our patented blend of conversational AI and human intelligence, we're able to maintain a consistent conversational approach regardless of language, accent, background noise, low volume. A customer just simply always is understood. And that means that they're reducing the frustration. So it's no longer the world where you have to repeat or ask for information again, because this blend of human intelligence and conversational AI allows customers to speak naturally in their own words. And that improves customer experience over time. So, regardless of the type of inquiry, customers just want to get their problem solved or they want to get their inquiry fixed. And they want to do so in the fastest way possible. And they want to make sure that it's efficient. So the VCA it enables that. It enables the fast, efficient care regardless of transaction type. And then again, it does so in a way that's very empathetic, which can be important in this space where financial data is sensitive and it can be uncomfortable to be dealing with things like that. So it really supports applying a brand persona that is kind and empathetic and judgment free, and it always stays on tune to that. And then lastly, it provides a very consistent and personalized experience through our ability to actually seamlessly integrate with backend systems. So we're able to pull in the right data to make these interactions flawless, but also extremely personal and customized for each individual. Before I close, I wanted to share a little anecdote or story about a customer of ours and the remarkable experience that they've had recently with working with us to deploy this. So in this scenario, this customer, they were looking to replace a legacy IVR, but that wasn't just it. They wanted to replace their legacy system, of course, but they wanted the capability to collect payment. And they wanted to ensure that they weren't detracting from their already great customer experience. That was really core to who they were as a brand. And they wanted to make sure with whatever they deployed, their customer was still at the center of the decisions that they were making. So we worked with this customer to deploy a self-service application. And this application in particular was able to route callers, but it also was able to help customers self-serve through a number of different transaction types, making payments, payment arrangements, payment deferrals being some of them, but then some others, including FAQs and some other customer service type inquiries. And the results that they saw were remarkable. So they had a 45% 45% of their interactions with their payment deferral interactions were handled through VCA, and 51% of their installment plans were handled through VCA as well. And that's great, but all of this equaled about a 20% annual savings in call handling costs, which is remarkable. And this has been a really successful deployment, but customers or end users are still happy as well, which just makes this success even better. So I just wanted to share that story about how collecting payments through VCA can have remarkable results across all facets of your business. And that does conclude the information I wanted to share today, but I'm happy to chat with anyone about VCA in more detail, or if you want to chat one-on-one, feel free to connect with me, and I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has anything.
McCall, that was great. So I'm going to hit reclaim host here. Yeah, and it's interesting just to see your walkthrough of applying your conversational AI solution to debt collection and that entire thought process and the mechanics of that. And debt's in the news a lot right now. I thought your stat at the beginning was super interesting, just about how 1 in 3 people getting a tax refund are using that to pay down debt. I wouldn't have guessed that. That's super interesting. And of course, lots in the news right now about paying down student debt, forgiving student debt, and that's interesting as well. Thank you for being part of the Voice of Money with us. Great job.
Of course. Thank you. Have a great day.
You got it. So I'm going to put you back as attendee. And next up is Andy Braun from Defined Crowd. So Andy, you're here and you're on mute.
I should be off mute.
There you go. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
You got it. So I'm going to make you host, which will let you share your screen.
All right. And I will share my screen. Hopefully we're up and running okay.
Yeah, looks great. Andy, thanks for being part of the Voice of Money with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I guess before I got into my presentation, I wanted to say, I really appreciate the invite. And then after watching the presentations earlier today, it reminds me a little bit of an anecdote. Maybe I'm older than a lot of the crowd here, but we used to pitch cloud, and when we would pitch cloud or work on it internally as part of the R&D team and build out various patent applications or things like that, you'd always draw the cloud as this big cloud, right? The details didn't quite matter, and it was always the end solution. And I think that's applicable to what I've seen so far, right? A lot of great solutions, but what we talk about is, and then you get the intent, and it comes out the other end. Someone calls in McCall's presentation, someone calls in, we know the intent is this, and it moves on. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this today. And I'll get into kind of my prepared remarks. So back in the 1850s, there was a gold rush in California. Gold was discovered in Sutter's Mill, California, and it was kind of a shock that transcended the country. People were running across to discover this newfound gold. And I think that's a perfect analogy for where we are today with AI. We've discovered AI can dig out great little nuggets, and there's tremendous opportunities there. And we're just at that discovery stage of the types of things it can do. So, first is, what is AI? Maybe this is a kind of little blocking and tackling, but, so AI, it seeks to make sense of this overwhelming amount of data that we have, and condense it into some sort of decision or intelligence. So in cars, we see that as being, a bunch of sensor data and images that they condense together to say, okay, make sure I don't hit someone. Or, is that a red light? And then in finance and in voice, it's, what am I saying? How do we make these decisions? And what we do is we're going to train AI on structured sets of data to make sense of all this unstructured data that's in the world. And then, so the question is, what is the difference between structured data and unstructured data? And do I have any unstructured data? Do I have structured data? Those are the kind of things that we're looking at right now. And, we can go ahead and, Google, what is structured data? What is unstructured data? And that'll give us, kind of these nice little definitions, right? Like structured data is highly organized. We can think of structured data as, maybe purchases that we have, or, when we go to the grocery store and pick up a thing of Frosted Flakes, that's structured data. Unstructured data, on the other hand, has no defined format, right? It's not organized, it's messy, it's hard to analyze, it's hard to collect, it's hard to process. So there's the differences. So I like those, if you Google them, I like those definitions, but what I like a little bit more is a simpler definition. And so here I think that life is unstructured data, everything we experience. One of the things I did learn about doing this presentation is that I could not use the image I wanted here, which was of Christian Leitner making the shot in 1992. Great shot, a meaningful part of my life. And I can tell you everything about that moment. And 2.1 seconds and those sorts of things. But it's an unstructured piece of data. Like I can't really search on that image of the shot or the reactions. So what do? We try to turn that into structured data. And the way we do that is we turn that scene into something by annotating it. And then I think, we all inherently understand that annotation is important. Today, for example, the fantasy football industry is a $20 billion industry, right? That's all about taking that unstructured data of football and turning into something we as humans can easily digest. And, here I can, is the abstract, the data, the searchable piece of information that we can go and take on that game back in 1992. So that leads me to, like, what I'd like to do is maybe restate my original statement of, AI trains on structured data to make sense of unstructured data. I think humans and AI, train on unstructured data to make sense of structured data. And again, it's the annotation that really turns it in there. It turns that unstructured data into structured data. So I could do just about anything to that video of that shot and make it into something more organized so that we can search on it, we can understand it, and then ultimately provide it to some sort of machine, whether it's an artificial intelligence machine or my brain, to help me make sense of it, maybe validate my decisions. Oh, that was a great shot because, I've annotated this and I know that a smiling face at the end is great. Or maybe it was a bad shot because I see people crying on the floor afterwards for the other team, right? It's all about how we're going to annotate that and what meaning we're going to take into it. So I've gone through about 8 of my slides so far. I haven't talked about finance or the gold rush or anything yet. So, let's talk about financial companies and why I think they're positioned in a great spot to make use of structured data and annotation. And I think that the first off is financial companies have been using structured data for a long time. Well before IVRs, the picture here, I think we've all had this feeling at some time in the past. You open up your credit card statement and you're like, I didn't buy that, right? Like, why do, I didn't buy that. Why is this on my statement? And then, looking at this picture again, the thing is, we don't actually ever see that on our statements now. We used to see it on our paper statements. When we look on the computer at our statement, we don't really see that anymore. And why is that? It's because financial companies have taken the structured data and they know what something is fraudulent in it, right? They know that if my statement, all of a sudden, if someone tries to charge 2 laptops in Armenia, well, that's a nice piece of structured data. It can make a decision on that in real time, right? Like it knows I'm in North Carolina, not in Armenia. It knows maybe I have a laptop already, and it can cancel it. So I don't ever experience this feeling here that we see on the screen. So I think ultimately what we have is financial companies are sitting on this giant gold mine, and that gold mine is the call center. So the call center, through various reasons, has, it's the #1 touch point of customers. I worked in IVR at Nuance for a bit, and we used to talk about, call center volumes are going to reduce. And with internet and other channels, and what we've seen is call center volumes have not been reduced, right? It is this vast wealth. And when we get on a call center call, the first thing we always hear is this call may be recorded for quality assurance. And, whether it's quality assurance or whether it's regulatory or, for future lawsuits, financial companies are maintaining all this unstructured data, which is the voice call. And so we have all this we have all this gold there, right? We know everything about the customer. We already have a bunch of structured data on them because they're our customers, but we know what they're asking about. And so how do we separate that gold that's in that call center data into actionable intelligence, into insights, into the ability to service the customers, like maybe some of the people that we talked about were talking about earlier today. And so I think we've started to do that already, right? This gold rush has started, as I said, in the IVR space, and we heard a couple of IVR people talk today. They're doing it already, right? Like, I don't call a call center to ask for my balance anymore. I may not even, call the IVR to check for my balance anymore. Maybe I do that on my IVR or on my virtual assistant. I won't say her name. But right, like right now, we're really just panning for gold. We've gotten the low hanging fruit. You can take out of the box, you can take any out of the box ASR and get some of these initial insights. You can do a balance. You can get check this, check that. I had an internet outage the other day, and I can go and call and say, hey, I have an internet outage, and they'll tell me, okay, it'll be back up at 3 o'clock, right? They can figure that out. What they can't do yet is when I call and say, hey, give me a refund because my internet's been out 3 times in the last 6 weeks, then I'm in that IVR hell that, I think other people have talked about. And you're trying to get to an agent, you can't get to an agent because we just can't figure that out yet, right? Like, that's this heavier intent where that piece of unstructured data, me asking for a refund, maybe I got sent to the reward section, is not there yet. So, while we're panning today, what we need for tomorrow is more advanced tools. And those advanced tools really start with the data and data annotation. So the key to the data annotation is, I think, threefold. And the kind of things that we do here at Define Crowd is you want to make sure you know what you're digging for. And you want to know where and how and those sorts of things. So what you really need on those advanced tools and turning your unstructured data into structured data is this map. So the map is, let's start with the aim, right? Like, what am I digging for? I'm digging for customer interactions. I want to understand, who's calling about, to use maybe McCall's example there, who's calling about COVID? Who's calling about COVID debt, right? So I can take a bunch of calls and I can annotate them. Okay, these are all COVID debt calls and feed those in to build out the ASR. I can guarantee that we have very few people pulling the COVID intent out back in January, right? This is all new data that needs to be trained. And the way you train that data is you annotate it. Okay, here's calls that are about COVID. Here's calls about coronavirus or whatever name you want to have on it, right? Like, it requires a large amount of data and a larger amount of annotation. And then the next part of it is, right, like, after we get the aim, okay, here's where I'm digging. Here's what I have for COVID is, the next piece is, how do we make sure that we're getting high quality out of that? How are we validating it? What metric do we need to have? Does this meet the requirements that we set up in the first place? It's all well and good to annotate data, but you really need to have a strategy, on validating it. So, at Define Crowd, what we do when we annotate our data is we send it back through to another one, right? Here's the annotation. Is this annotation correct? And then finally, right, does it meet some sort of metric, right? Do you test against it and make sure you're capturing the types of data you need? Is your annotation working the way you want it to work? So while we're sitting on this gold mine here, tons of data, I think it's important, right? Like, what is the big problem with that, right? Like, how do we address these kind of scary words that I have on here, the cave-ins, the PCI, the GDPR, the CCPAs of the world. It's not about, there's these challenges that we have to overcome on using this data. And I think there's a number of ways that we can do that. We can avoid these cave-ins. So first off, to extract that gold out of the thing, we don't have to use the actual gold itself, right? We can simulate all sorts of data and annotate that. I can go and collect a bunch of crowd workers that will build out a set of financial information that's simulated, right? So now I don't have to worry about PCI or GDPR. It's all fake information, and I can annotate that in the same way I would the real data. So I can get that annotation of, hey, let me get the semantic annotation on it. Okay, I'm going to go and collect a bunch of people who are angry or upset or fearful because of COVID, and give those sorts of semantic tags to this data, and then apply it to the real gold and extract it that way. And that'll get us a little bit more of the way there. The other thing we can do is we can anonymize, right? You have this, call it washing the gold, right? You have these pieces, we can anonymize that and pull out the identifying, GDPR, PCI type data. And I think that'll work. And then finally, right, and I think these are all stages. Finally, we can do, we can annotate it in secure facilities, right? Do we have, some private facility where we're going to work on that data outside prying eyes of other people and address it that way? And in my mind, each is a different step depending on where you are. And that kind of leads me into what I feel is like my closing here. I think the important other thing to learn is if we look back at this initial piece of gold, right, there's some gold in there, but there's a lot of other stuff in there too, right? Is there palladium in there? Is there tungsten? What else is in there? So we can do multiple annotations. And we have, the perfect answer on what to dig for next because we have the call center, right? We can analyze what's getting through, what's not being self-served by all those items. So if I do my first annotation for, I want all my, I want to make sure that I'm capturing information on how demographics are affecting the satisfaction of my customer, right? So I have, age annotation along with sentiment annotation. Okay, that all gets through, and I find that 80% of 50-year-old women are getting through to the call center. Okay, what am I doing wrong, right? I can take that data and re-annotate it now that I have a new problem, a new map to search for. So I think that's important as well, is to remember that this is a never-ending sort of cycle where we're going to make 5 yards forward each time, but it continue to get better and better. And the key to that is really additional data annotation. And that takes me through my slides.
Andy, yeah, that was great. Interesting. I'm going to hit reclaim host here. Yeah, I like the metaphor, and I think it's a great compliment to, and if you want to unshare your screen as well, it's a great compliment to several of the other presentations. Just seeing your thoughts on data, collecting it, annotating it, feeding it back into these training models. Yeah, I enjoyed that. Thank you very much for being part of Voice of Money with us.
Thanks. I appreciate the time.
You got it. So I'm going to put you back as attendee, and that will bring up our closer, who is John Stein of the Open Voice Network. And there we go. John, I see you in here, and there you go. John, how are you?
I'm fine, Bradley. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
You got it. So I'm going to make you host. And it's great to end something like this with hearing about the Open Voice Network. We appreciate you being part of this with us.
No, my pleasure. Let me pull up the slides. Bear with me a second here. And we should be on the screen. Is that coming through?
Yes, I can see it. You want to make it full. There you go. Perfect.
Hey, thank you everyone for the time. And I promise that I'll end on time here. The title, Conversational Standards and Protocols, the Financial Sector. But what we're talking about here is a new organization. tied to the Linux Foundation that is working to address a lot of the questions that have been brought forward through the previous hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. Questions of privacy, questions of use, questions of componentization and standardization. A quick introduction. I'm the executive director based in Portland, Oregon, of what's called the Open Voice Network. It's a nonprofit industry association. We're affiliated with the Linux Foundation, and many of you have been working with the Linux Foundation through the many years. Openness, open standards, open technology. And we're approaching the question of voice and voice standards and voice technology, if you will, from the user perspective. What's going to be right for the enterprise users of voice? What do the developers and designers of voice need? Where is all this going? And what do we need for a future where, and from the first conversations about the Open Voice Network, where voice in all of its forms is going to be in most shape the relationship between a client and a brand, a consumer and a brand, a patient and a provider. And especially the financial services industry being the leader in the use of voice, these are critical questions before us. Who am I? Former Intel, former Cisco, former consumer goods executive. Now, as I said, leading the Open Voice Network, and we'll talk more about that. But we're really at the edge of a market transition, and the challenge of a market transition, and it's just not voice. No. It's voice in taking its next steps. You listen to Bradley, you listen to Brett Kinsella. This is a rapidly evolving market. And, in moving from where we are today, we've got to be thinking about where we're going tomorrow. We're walking into the unknown, much as this visual, kind of foggy, kind of cloudy, not yet known. But what we know, I think we can all agree, today is phase early. We're in the early days of voice. Dimitri showed, back to the old PC days. We're kind of in the browser war days, if you want to use the internet analogy. We are in the earliest days. How many phases? Who knows? But we know we're early. And if we know we're early, we're also facing questions of these. And especially when we think that the next phase, or a phase in front of us, again, emphasized by Brett's research, coming out from a report from RAIN Agency in Seattle just several days ago, we're all moving toward the days of independent voice assistants. Assistants owned by enterprises, operated by enterprises, developed by many of you in the development community. And those are huge questions of data ownership, huge questions of interoperability, huge questions of how this is going to be made worthy of user trust and create user value. We're in a voice-first world, as Bradley and Brian Romilly and others emphasize. But today, again, a key point, we're in phase early. And as we move toward phase N, whatever that is, these are some of the big questions that are before us. These are questions that the Open Voice Network is beginning to address. When you think about these questions, and especially phase next or phase N, whatever that is, these are issues at the bottom line, and especially for the enterprise, financial services, commerce. These are issues of value extraction. These are issues of value creation, value delivery, but most of all about value extraction. Voice is a tool. How much of that value that is created will you, as an enterprise, as a developer for enterprises, a designer for enterprises, how much will you receive? How much will you gain? How much will you capture? Critical questions. These are the questions of phase next. There's also, these are issues and questions of user trust. Think about it. Think of the issues, many of which identified here just a moment ago. The issues of how do you use the data? What data is out there? How do you use it? Can you make it easy to use? What we're really facing in voice right now is what we would term the trust gap. Now, every new technology goes through this. Voice is far from unique. Again, go back to PC, mobile, this, that. When I joined Intel in the year 2000, and this is a true story, one of the first assignments I was given was to answer the question, will women use the internet? Think about that. Will women use the internet? Because it's scary. Data might be taken, your credit card might be stolen. Would you share anything about your personal life over this crazy internet? Yes, an actual assignment. Will, year 2000, 20 years ago, will women use the internet? Mr. Zuckerberg probably would have a position on that right now. All of digital retailing and all of digital financial services might have a position on that. But the internet then, mobility then, and now voice faces this gap between, as we know, between availability, 500 million, Google, and adoption, and then ultimately regular usage. For all of us in the voice industry, closing this trust gap, and again, it's standard. Will it ever close completely? No. But must we narrow it? Absolutely. And must we narrow it for the value of users, developers, designers, and ultimately end users of voice? Absolutely. And again, those questions that come up about just lack of trust. Is my data safe and secure? They're on the right side. Can I, as an enterprise user, is that commercial data, is that mine? Will you be able to understand me? Do I feel stupid when I try and use your IVR, your voice assistant, your this to that? And ultimately, will it create value for my business? We're in a zero-sum game for marketing over the next many, many years. There is not going to be extra money to be doing, hey, let's try some new cool technology. Maybe here and there. But by and large, voice is going to have to prove itself in the zero-sum game of investment. Something will be taken out so voice can be placed in. And again, for all of us in the enterprise voice community, users, developers, designers, how do we close this trust gap in order to create quantifiable, sustainable value? It's a critical question for us. We of the Open Voice Network would suggest one of the critical ways you do that, not the only way, but one of the critical ways you do that is through answering some of the critical, huge questions that are now before us in voice. Let me go through some of those. Oh, I should mention this. No trust? No business. The hesitations of users, you've seen it in some of Brett's research. You've seen it in James Poulter's recent research from Vixen Labs in the UK. Technology, do I trust it? And it was the same, again, in mobile, the same in the internet. But we're at that point. Can artificial intelligence tell the difference between good and evil? Can I trust this is being used? Do I trust my data is safe? When there's no trust, there's no business. Now, you could say, we could all say, oh, let's just wait. Let's wait a few years. It'll be taken care of. Why wait? Why just let this resolve itself? Think of what happened in the internet in terms of standardization in governance protocols and the like that allowed us to be able to find each other, to have data protection, for individual websites to emerge and be used and found. It advanced trust and advanced trust quickly and created, if you will, one of the key factors in creating this mammoth value creation industry we know as the digital world. Let's talk about 5 critical trust issues that are in front of us right now. One of the biggest ones is search. In a voice-only world, and even to a degree in a multimodal world, will your shoppers, will your customers, will your clients, will they have patience to listen to a list, and especially for implicit search? Will they be able to find you directly if it's an explicit request? Or is there something out there that can claim your name? Is there something out there that they've got to work through in a platform to find you? Search increasingly in a voice-only world will be winner take all. SEO value extraction will accelerate and amplify, not go away, not reduce. How do we deal with search in a voice-centric world? A second one, who owns the data? For financial services companies, the lifeblood, and again, we just, listening to the gold in those hills from Andy just a moment ago. There is gold in those hills of the data, but if you don't own it and you can't claim it, someone else will extract the value, melt it down, and turn it into jewelry and bankable assets. Will you own your data? Now, yes, we need data for training algorithms. Of course we do. But do they really need yours? How will you maintain the independence and the protection of your commercial data, the interactions between you and your clients? Enormous question for the growth of the value of voice for the enterprise. A third, just talking about unstructured and structured data. Yes, and we all know this. You're all voice experts, deeper in the technology, I'm sure, than I am. But we know from MIT and the recent IETF paper that yes, I can diagnose COVID based on coughs and voice prints of coughs. I can diagnose schizophrenia from the sound of voice. I can listen to the background and know whether you're in Seattle, Portland, or New York. And I know who you are. Now, how do we deal as an industry with the depth of this data and the potential harms that this data represents? I had an industry association legal expert, head of advising a number of tier 1 enterprises around the world and certainly in the United States say, John, if this isn't solved, if you guys can't figure out how this data is going to be handled, no corporate counsel is going to touch voice. I can assure you, John, no one's going to touch voice if you can't, as an industry, figure this out. Inclusivity. Can you hear everyone? I speak Midwestern white guy, and so I'm understood quite well. In fact, I grew up in the Midwest. I have Cincinnati TV announcer dialect, and I'm understood quite well. But I'm of the minority in the United States of speaking Cincinnati TV announcer. Can they hear you? Can you connect with disabled shoppers? Can you be heard by underrepresented clients and patients? Do they understand you? And then finally, this big question. It's not just the enterprise independent assistant that's in front of us. It's the personal digital assistant future. How will you be the brand of preference for financial services, ranging from checking to investment, in a future of the digital assistant? Is there will there be protocols and ways to manage this? Or is it just going to be wild, wild west out there among the 49ers? We're entering a voice value world. It's no longer cool enough. It's no longer nifty enough. It's no longer worthy, quite honestly, in a COVID world of just showing, oh, listen, watch, computers can hear you. You all know we're way past this. We're in the value phase now. We are entering the value phase. I appreciated McCall's presentation, Dimitri's presentation. Here's where the money's being made. That's how we're going to be thinking. That's one of the values that standards will bring. standards and governance communally developed. Now, the Open Voice Network is a nonprofit, neutral, under the Linux Foundation. I shared that with you. Here are our 4 guiding values. You can read along. I'll speak to just the headlines. Trust. How do we make this worthy of user trust? Choice. Choice for users, trust in ecosystem, trust in architecture for developers. How we make it inclusive. Inclusivity and accessibility, how do we make it open? How do we create those standards-based building blocks that allow all of us to build purpose-based, purpose-directed voice assistants? How do we give commercial entities the opportunity to create differentiation and to innovate? How do we do that? Doing these things, and standards have shown, will grow the market. Here's 5 big ideas we're chasing right now. And please know, colleagues, you are welcome to join us. We're Open Voice Network. You're welcome to join us in this research and exploration. First, an open internet for voice. We think we need a voice registry system, a destination registry for voice. Speaking with Adam Chire about this, he said, you know, if there was one idea that you guys pursued that was most important, it would give us an opportunity to find each other in a standard, common, platform agnostic way, a DNS for voice. A second one, big idea, is enterprise data and ownership. This is an exploration going on right now and among a number of big names that we're talking with. Is there a commercial right of privacy? No, maybe not really, kind of, sort of. But do we know that enterprises, to grow the value that they're finding in voice, that they need to be protecting, you need to be protecting the data between you and your clients, you and your patrons, you and your guests? Absolutely. How do we protect the right of enterprises to speak to their customers? Third, platform and assistant interoperability. Interoperability defined as much more than competing voice assistants on a single device. What we're working on right now is standardizing building block components. What are the components of voice assistants? How do they fit together? How do we, here's the tough one, how do we define those components so that the definition is extensible, so that it's future-proofed to whatever degree we can? How do we create room for commercial differentiation? All these issues, and working on those right now. Enterprise ethical use. What are the guidelines? When you're sitting down, not with your voice developers, but when you're sitting down with counsel, you're sitting at the board, your CEO is facing board and investors. How do you give guidance, and what is that guidance for the ethical and legal use of voice and voice data? Can we have a communally developed industry set of guidelines? And then finally, how do we prove industry use cases? We have seen just in the presentations today a number of proven use cases, IVR, this, that, and other. Fantastic. But now let's move into that world that's kind of out there in the mist of independent voice assistants, and moving beyond call center into any number of other operational uses, additional customer-facing uses. What do we do and how, as Andy was talking about, when we listen intently to our customers, where can value be created and captured there? The process of testing and proving industry use cases. We've been at this for about 5 months. We started in 2016 in a coffee shop in Boston, talking to colleagues at MIT and Capgemini Consulting. We joined with Linux on October 19, became official in June 2020 this year. Right now, we have a handful of enterprise sponsors, a number of other tier 1 enterprises participating and checking us out. Roughly 150 independent developers participating with us, and we're anticipating RFCs as soon as January in these 4 areas: voice-specific privacy, voice-specific security, a voice registry system or a DNS for voice, and the first thoughts on voice assistant component interoperability. Come a long way in a short time, and again, you're welcome to join us. Voice assistants worthy of user trust. That's what we're up to, and we're the Open Voice Network. You can find us at www.openvoicenetwork.org. I'm John Stein. There's my email. Would love to chat with you. And Bradley, thanks for the time.
John, that was great. So I'm going to, actually, I'll leave this up for another second so people can see it. And I want to point this out, that this question that's in the chat, I'm going to just read it verbatim. What's the best way to get started with the Open Voice Network as a beginner or someone hoping to break into voice user interface design?
Send me an email, and 2, we will connect you to one of our communities of volunteers and independents. And one of those communities is about design and strategy, putting together, and now they're working on some design guidelines. Join us, send me a note. You see the email there, and we'll get you connected into the right community. Delighted.
That's excellent. So I'm going to hit reclaim host, and John, if you will unshare your screen there. There you go. John, it's always a pleasure. And
Pleasure.
Yeah, you're doing phenomenal work. Thank you for closing the Voice of Money for us and being part of it with us. So we appreciate you.
Bradley, thank you.
You got it. For the Voice of Money, typically in person, maybe next year, we'll find out. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of it with us. We appreciate you.